Hello, everyone. Proctor, more like protractor. Get it? Cause he's late. Uh, so I had fun right now. I have a cup of coffee, by the way. If you hear like strange clinking sounds or crunching noises, because I have some shortbread biscuits with some very nice coffee. Some very, very nice coffee. It's a blend of Colombian and Guatemalan coffee. I find is just very delicious, and I have it through like a drip method, which is very pleasant. Mm. Hello, Proctarium. Hello, Ducato. Hello, Lumi. Nice to see you. I hope everything's going well with your podcast and stuff. Hello, Maniacal Foreigner. Hello, John Doe. No, probably fairly light on the VTuber drama at the moment. There is some stuff that I'll probably talk about on Wednesday. But for the moment, it seems like the Kenji situation and everything is more or less calming down. So we get a chance to relax for a change. It's also no longer full moon, and I have spent pretty much the last day feeling as if somebody's come up behind me. And, you know, like an air pump. Imagine if somebody, like, put an air pump in you, but instead of, like, pumping you full, they just kind of extracted everything from you. I feel like that. I feel like I've had... I've been drained. I've just been mentally drained. It's probably because I was up for, like, 36 hours straight, and then I only got a regular amount of sleep, then I was up again. Sorry, little buzzy flying things are around at the moment. It's hitting that part of the year where insects start to really show up and come through my window, which I have to keep open. Warhammer celebrating shows it takes no effort to please these vapid fools. I mean, thing is that they'll celebrate for a little bit, but then they'll inevitably say, oh wait, there's this other thing you need to change now. I do not need correction. I am the one that administers the correction. Remember, I am a dominant. I am not as submissive like 99% of all apparent male VTubers. I just don't understand why anybody would find a submissive man attractive. I mean, admittedly, it's like, I feel like submissive men, an awful lot of men say, oh yeah, submissive men and traps are hot, or whatever. And it's exactly, come to think of it, I think it's the exact same situation as to why a lot of hot leftist women say that all women are valid, including the ugly ones, and the ones that there's no standards of beauty, or that a woman can do whatever she likes with her body and still be attractive. Because to me, if you're a masculine man and the men around you are twinks and traps, then they're no threat to you. Like, they're not going to be stealing your woman. They're not going to be a threat to you. If anything, they're going to be an opportunity for you, because like they're more likely to be into cuckoldry and all that kind of nonsense, and they're not going to be satisfying any women they do get. So yeah, I actually do think the twink and trap stuff is the reverse version of like the beautiful feminist. There can be a switch in a relationship. Switches don't exist. I've never met a single switch in my entire life. Anybody who says that they're a switch is literally just either a paper tiger, or is like, I'm a switch because every other person is, like, I'm 95% submissive, and everybody else in my vicinity is 99% submissive, so by default, I'm the most dominant person in the entire room. That's what a switch is. Switches are like bisexuals. They will always, always settle on one or the other eventually. I think the only form of, like, valid bisexuality is where you've become such a massive coon brain and have been so indoctrinated into the mouse utopia that you've just completely lost all sense of sexuality as it references the biological need to perpetuate your species, and are just like just a pure and complete slave to dopamine. In modern society, there'll be a threat because they are probably going to F you over like a woman, certainly. Non-submissive men are also dangerous in their own... You know, we're starting off this stream They're starting all of this stream in a very wholesome and normal way, as always. I will say this: Warhammer Thing has shown that a long-time female players are tisms and have an amazing hate for normies and women. I mean, yeah. Sorry, I just have this last bit of biscuit. Get the other way. I'm not making too many noises while I talk. Oh, I really love shortbread. Shortbread is a really, really good biscuit. Oh, coffee. Yeah. I mean, it just reinforces what I've said so many times before, that autism is masculinity disease. Autism simply heightens all of the traits that a man naturally has. And in women, all that autism generally does is it's why women manage to cope with autism far better than men. Because a man is already, well, he's already a man. And so autism exaggerates the traits that he normally has, whereas a woman with autism will generally just be a tomboy. So does that mean liking a woman with autism is gay? Thrang, am I gonna have to like gather up Kirsha in my arms and like throw her at you cannonball style, so that she can just grab you and yell in your face that it's not gay to like women, okay? Like, it's gay biologically. It's not. Like, I am a straight. Proctor, it's a joke, you mong. I'm not Nick Fuentes. Now, technically, Thrang, I've literally never heard you speak. As far as I know, not a single person on the entire internet has ever heard your voice, so you can't actually claim not to be Nick Fuentes. You could very well be Nick Fuentes, alright? You have nothing... That's the thing about OPSEC. You are very, very good OPSEC, so unfortunately, that also works both ways. It means there's no chance that you are certain things, but also, at the same time, you could also be other things. That's the worst insult anyone has ever said to me. Liking tomboys is only 50% gay, so it's safe as long as you say no homo. Look, this is something that Kirshi rages on about, and I agree with her. You can like the most masculine woman on Earth, and you are still not gay, because guess what? She's a woman. Biological reality does exist. That vagina is not somehow a male's vagina, okay? There are male penises and female vaginas. That's it. It doesn't matter whether a man is the most... It doesn't matter if a man is so feminized that he would win a beauty pageant with the most beautiful women on Earth. He's still got a penis. He's still a man, and having sex with him makes you at least gay, if not bisexual. Whereas it doesn't matter if you're after the tomboyest tomboy in the entire universe. They're still a woman. You're still straight if you have sex with them or are attracted to them. And the only thing I very slightly think that the more traditional, well, not traditional, like the opposite traditional people who study sexuality and so on, the only thing that I will give them is that I do agree that it's kind of a silly idea to think there's such a thing as absolutely straight or anything like that, because biology is attracted to certain things. Stuff like male vaginas is a way of trying to press gang as many people as possible into supporting the alphabet mafia. Yeah. And it's like looking at a man who has like big muscles or something and finding that attractive does not make you gay. There's a difference. This is one of the most annoying things that I find about the internet, and it was a thing long before the hyper-progressive woke nonsense started infiltrating itself into everything. But it's this idea that, and I really hate it. In fact, it's kind of the subject. I'm going to switch up what we were talking about, what I was going to talk about first, because this is I apologize for the barking in the background, by the way. This is a Twitter thing that I saw, which I very strongly think points to an issue that I have as well. One second. Oh dear. I had curry earlier. It was extremely nice. Aspiration is not gay. Yeah, yeah, maniacal forward, exactly. Now, studio mode. Yep, my tabs are working. Oh, am I making sure to... Because I'm getting a lot of messages on Twitter. I do not want to accidentally reveal my Twitter DMs list. No, we're fine, we're fine. Okay, so I think this... There we go. This is from Alaric the Barbarian, a guy whose material I found myself quite enjoying recently. And he says there's a bit of a contradiction in today's leftism in which behavior of some groups can be nudged or shifted by policy, but other groups are gonna do it anyway no matter what. Their behavior is rhetorically treated as if it is set in stone. It seems like a contradiction, but like everything else, it's an expression of a friend-enemy distinction. The groups with unstoppable behavior are client and target groups: blacks, gays, drug addicts, women, and a very narrow version of teenagers. Examples are, we need to decriminalize drugs, people will do them anyway. We need to legalize abortion, people will do it anyway. Let us teach kids about butt plugs in third period health class, they'll learn about it on the internet anyway. Decriminalize theft, it'll happen anyway. Meanwhile, the groups with a totally malleable and legislative behavior, and generally middle to upper class white people, Republicans, men broadly, etc. Sorry, here we go. There's gun control, left-type cultural views on something, entire culture of the left-type, HR dominance, Section 8 everywhere, type YIMBYism. I think he means not in my backyard-ism. Political enemies can be legislated and punished into compliance. Client groups and friend demographics must always be allowed to do what they want. This works better for the left because they control the cultural paradigm right now. In this case, it's being expressed as this very narrow view of teenagers as rebellious, natural leftists pissing off their conservative parents equals friend, uptight, old-school parents, proxy by their own parents, are the enemies. You won't find similar support for the teenager when it's a frustrated atheist parent whose kid is going to church, or in high-profile cases like Rittenhouse. Suddenly, parenting should be very strict. And this is from the whole Reddit Lies account, where he's some of the examples. But this is these answers are just this guy's got 153 points. I hate Reddit. Like Reddit. She wants them to watch movies in her bedroom, door closed. I told her that was inappropriate, not permitted, and all of r/dad it would agree with me. She says I'm mental. Who's right? This example is a daughter wants to invite her boyfriend over to our house for a visit. And here are some select replies. Dr. God Carl, what I do, revisit the sex talk beforehand, talk about using protection, talk about consent, and then give her her privacy. She's 17. She's very nearly a full adult, certainly better than her studying after school and parking the car somewhere remote. Yeah, Greasy Alfredo, low, my parents had this rule for my girlfriend, now wife, and I when we were teenagers. We just effed with the door open, so yeah, go dad, it doesn't work. And Suffend, yep, the door had to be open at my boyfriend's house, and it was not a deterrent in any way. I mean, we kept quiet, but we were still... Yeah, I've seen hard left hippies kids go hard into Christian conservatism. I mean, so have I. This takes the don't bother making your bed, it'll get messy again anyway attitude to its extreme. Giga Dramano, God, I hate those Section 8 everywhere people. I know a lot of good... sorry, that went on my screen. I know a lot of good people benefit from it, but there are some serious bad eggs in the program. To make the parents actually do... Oh, sorry. Gigadramon 6 again. I had a Sec 8 family that absolutely refused to discipline their children who would break into people's yards and steal things. It took my next-door neighbor going to their house with a gun to make their parents actually do anything about them. That's a very base neighbor. I highly commend him. How to lose against teenage pregnancy 1v1. What does this have to do with Warhammer 40k? I mean, the reason I bring it up is because it highlights a very similar mindset, because a very standard leftist tactic is to basically go, why do you care about this? It's going to happen anyway. Like, one of their arguments for Warhammer 40k would be, you know, it's a tabletop game, players are allowed to make up their own rules, hashtag Warhammer is for everyone, so why would you care that this one thing, you know, what does it matter to you? Isn't this an arbitrary line in the sand? You know, why is this thing a problem for you when you have no problem with somebody, you know, making up their own orc faction or whatever? Like, what's the difference, bro? Why do you care? Doesn't this seem a little bit extremist? And it's the same thing that goes back, because this is something that progressive types use almost all the time when they are trying to sabotage the opposition. They'll constantly pull this silliness kind of, it doesn't matter, it'll happen anyway, there's nothing you can do about it, just make it easy and safe. And that's the thing, they talk about like this guy up here, Dr. God Carl, what I do, revisit the sex talk beforehand and talk about using protection. So what he's saying is, you can't stop your daughter having sex, just make sure she has safe sex. And it's the same with, say, people who say drugs should be decriminalized. They say, oh, you can't stop people doing drugs, but what you should do is make sure, people have like safe needle injection sites, so that, they won't hurt themselves as much if that's the case. Maniacal Foreigner says, why do you care about pronouns so much? Isn't gender just an arbitrary line in the sand anyway? Yeah, and my best retort is, why do you care is it, if it's such a non-issue, why do you care about so much about it? Touch Fluffy Tail, to be fair, there have been many retcons in Warhammer. Introducing women to the Custodians is kind of minor thing that changes still shit and lame there. Again, I disagree. I do disagree with you, because, see, the thing is, you could have female custodians. There's nothing wrong with that idea in and of itself. What is wrong is how you implement it. Like, for example, I remember watching, I think it was Luthien on YouTube, who does Warhammer lore videos, and I'm basically regurgitating the same point that he made, is that he said, Warhammer's canon is very flexible. You have people like Belisarius Cawl, for example, who has spent 10,000 years tampering with the genome of the Space Marines. So you could just say, oh, Belisarius Cawl invented this method that would allow the custodian genetic engineering system to be applied to the custodians. And what you could do is say that because of the incredibly dangerous nature of Warhammer in the 41st millennium, with the tear in reality and so on spanning across half the galaxy, you could say that the custodians have finally admitted that they can't be as selective anymore, and they're willing to accept female children into their ranks as well, and the failure rate is going to be much higher. But for, let's say, I don't even know what the numbers are, but let's say for every 1 million sons that enter the custodies, one becomes a male custodian. Let's say every 5 million daughters that go into the custodians, one of them becomes a custodian. Because that is not an impossible... It would still be a bit clunky, and I wouldn't really agree with it. But, yeah, I'm talking about the change, ignoring everything else, of course. The reason behind the change is the insidious part. Yeah, I'm glad you understand that, Touch Fluffy Tail. I'm glad you understand that, because what they do constantly is they make these changes, and then they come up with the justification. The change comes first, and then the justification. That's always the progressive attitude. We'll change something, and when people complain, then we will create the justification for it. Whereas, as I said, if it was just a change to say, oh, we would like more female custodians because we think that would be cool, then they could have done the more traditional route, which would respect the canon. They didn't gaslight you by saying, no, it's always been like this. They were just honest about, this is canon going with now we think it's better. Oh, I see. I thought you were talking about the custodians thing. I'll read this up here. The first comment that you said was, there have been retcons, even major ones like turning the Necrons from an army of Terminators into the Tomb Kings, but they were honest about them being retcons. And Board said they have to censor and rewrite history for their justification of something that is deemed non-inclusive or problematic. It's their playbook 101. Yeah. And that is a good point as well, that when these people are all about power, because remember, their argument is like, isn't it like oppression is comes from power plus privilege? Power plus privilege equals oppression. And they are basically showing off their power by saying, we don't need to consult you. We don't need to look at all the old lore. We can just say there are female custodians now, and there is nothing you can do about it. Because the power move is the point. The point is that they have the power to simply step in and change something because they want to. and they don't have to justify it. And it shows off that they are the ones now in charge. It's like there's an old like 4chan meme about, well, it's like a copy pasta. And I don't have it on my hard, it's on an encrypted hard drive somewhere, because around like the time that Ireland was talking about its insane anti-free speech laws, I basically put all of my political content that I've got on my computer, and I encrypted it on a hard drive, and I got it off my main computer. Their statement is everything sorry. Their statement of everything is political is a major confession, not an accusation. They're saying everything they do has a political motive behind it. Yeah. That is precisely right. It is always political in their mindset. It's just like Anita Sarkeesian said, everything is sexist, everything is racist, and it's your job to point it all out. Plus, this is a push from Amazon, BlackRock, and Vanguard. Yeah, that's true as well. And you can't... If you want to talk to these people, you shouldn't. But what I would say is the best way to do it is to get them to explain themselves. Because remember, even with all of the political nonsense that has been going on in the last few years, a huge number of people are still bystanders. They still don't fully understand what all of this is about. And so when you see people, and they're usually inclined to give the people with the progressive types the benefit of the doubt. And so when they see long threads of like progressive people going, yay, there's female custodians in Warhammer now, trans flag, trans flag, trans flag, trans flag. And somebody underneath starts like a 10 post twit longer about how no, male custodians are the only thing. You're completely wrong, you're an evil subversive, and all this stuff, then a bystander who maybe leans slightly towards progressivism might read that thread and go, all this looks like, I know nothing about Warhammer, but all this looks like is some asshole person in the fandom who is very angry about this totally benign change that people are celebrating. So I'm going to side with the people who I feel are now being oppressed. And that's something that you have to remember, and that's why I say the best tactic to deal with progressive infiltration is to get them to say the quiet part out loud. It's difficult because it requires you to be quite passive in a lot of ways, and that is a very difficult thing to do, and I acknowledge it's a very difficult thing to do. But if you develop what I think this strategy of asking leading and polite questions that lets you act as if you retain the moral high ground, because sooner or later they will get angry at you and they will show their true colors, because they are taught to be impulsive, irrational people who feel that the truth is on their side and that ultimately they will win. Because all of the polite and kind and nice and, oh, it's more inclusive now stuff is just a shield. And engaging with them on that level is playing directly into their hands. Ow. Ow! Sorry, just one moment. I have got something stuck in my eye. That is quite painful. Ow. I really hope that something hasn't flown into it. I might have to go put eye drops in a minute. Yay, female XYZ now. I will consider buying it. Spoiler, they never will. Yeah. Hell, that quote from Sarkeesian leaves out the context that was her realization that she needed to be subversive instead of overt with her tactics. Touch fluffy tail, BlackRock is going to consume everything, just wait for them to become investors in Cover Core. I mean, doesn't HoloLive literally have a Californian branch now? They care about putting a flag in the ground to signal they have conquered something. Precisely. And I'm going to be a bit controversial here, because my stance has always been, you can't use Marxist tactics against Marxists. And Marxist and socialist tactics always revolve around big government or big corporate initiatives. When people like Stalin and people like Karl Marx and all these other people began their revolutionary work. They realized, in fact, I believe that it was Lenin or possibly Marx himself who wrote that the most staunch defenders of the old regime are actually the peasants who know nothing different but the regime. The idea of being free is, in his words, is such a scary idea that the peasants would rather fight to keep their chains than face the reality of life without their chains. And the point is that I see that from a different lens, is that people who understand what they have, who are fully educated as to the benefits of the system they operate under at the moment, will be much less likely to fall to indoctrination. The people who fall to Marxist and socialist indoctrination, are the aimless. They are the low IQ. They are the idealists who have been cast out by regular society. They are the people who don't fit in. And there's a reason why socialism always targets two main things. It targets religion, and it targets the family structure. Because those things have a natural, incredibly high level of resilience against propaganda. Because religion gives people a motivation to live for something beyond themselves, and family structure does the same thing. Whereas the people that are vulnerable to socialist indoctrination are ones who are aimless and helpless and have fallen outside of the traditional power structure. The problem with Marx is that he can't view anything outside of his own machine. His own doctrine, rather. Gigatron 6, that make them say the quiet part out loud thing is the tactic I use with arguing against gun control. Anyone who knowingly supports gun control is always malicious or irrational. I agree. You say that, but there are an awful lot of socialist intellectuals. Yeah, well, the thing is that, again, the socialist intellectuals are... Oh, there's so many layers to this topic. It's very difficult for somebody like me who is great at talking about lots of stuff to narrow things down and be concise about it. I have never encountered it as a genuine position as anything but I want to be able to control others by proxy. Yeah. When the new religion colonizes a new area, the best way to convert the natives is to change and adapt their existing stories and traditions to the new doctrine. Yes, precisely. That is exactly and completely correct in every way, Arclight. But and to develop resistance against that, like the counter to that is to fully understand why the things that you cherish are things worth cherishing. Because I feel that an awful lot of people enjoy things on a very surface level. They enjoy something because it makes them feel good, which is perfectly valid. If something makes you feel good, then overall, it's probably not a bad thing, unless it's taken to an excess. But a lot of people are not taught how to appreciate something beyond vapid, oh, this gives me a dopamine hit. And it's when you develop that level of higher commitment to something that you become immune to the propaganda and you become immune to compromise, because you see the compromise as what it is, an effort to dumb down and subvert the deeper meaning within the thing that you enjoy. Socialism is very appealing to intellectuals. Smart people are able to rationalize incredibly stupid things, and a lot of intellectuals are actually failures at life who've done nothing in life. I would really... One of my stream ideas in future is exploring Hegelian dialectics. And maybe a bit of Gnosticism as well, because Hegelian dialectics is at the core of so much Marxist propaganda, and I see it coming up all the time. When I do my own research, pretty much every person that has ever seriously spoken out about socialism and Marxism and progressivism on a high level, on a high intellectual level, on a high academic level, on a high business level, has always realized that it comes down to Hegelian dialectics. And pretty much all of their work includes an explanation of Hegelian dialectics and why Hegelian dialectics is a very, 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 very dangerous thing. But obviously Hegelian dialectics is not something that a lot of people understand. And I think that's for a reason. I really do feel that one of the greatest victories of socialism is the dumbing down of education. Because I said this in Kirsch's stream a few months ago. I said to her, well, this was a comment that I made, that it's almost impossible to talk about the way younger people act and think with older people these days. People in their 60s and 70s, I find, especially. Because, and I've had this happen many times, that I'll try and explain the mindsets and the attitudes of young people to older people. And the older people will refuse to believe me. And they refuse to believe me because they always say some variation of this. They say, these ideas are completely insane. And I refuse to believe this is actually a thing. You must be joking with me, because any child that has gone through like very basic education will know these kind of things don't work, and will just be able to just say, no, I'm not going to listen to this. This is stupid. And that's when I say to them, yeah, why do you think all those classes are no longer taught in schools? Why do you think that we've had things like economic classes? Why do you think we've had language classes? Why do you think we've had all these different classes like philosophy, politics, all these things? Why do you think they've changed so much in the last 100 years or so? It's because the socialists realized that the school system was providing people with the tools they needed to defeat them. And so they infiltrated the schools and they turned them into their own recruitment centers. And that's why I say that you don't instruct people to become anti-progressive. You breed them. Because the kind of child that is inherently anti-socialist is the kind of child that has had a good education in a small, tight-knit community and understands the value of traditional community values. Whereas somebody, that's why that conservatism and progressivism, or conservatives and liberals, conservatives tend to be rural and liberals tend to be in the cities. I totally agree with Schopenhauer on Hegel. Kent was severely autistic and tied himself down at night with ropes. Yeah, my doesn't believe people that dumb are among us. And it's a real sad thing because, yeah, my dad does. Yeah, your dad. I see what you mean, Muffy Graves. And it's that generational gap that socialism is so good at exploiting. And that's why if I ever have children, and I intend to have children at some point in my life, I am never going to send them to school. Or at the very least, if I send them to school, I am going to know exactly what that school teaches. I am going to get my child to tell me precisely what they were told in school. And I am going to make absolutely sure that none of that insanity ever infiltrates my child's mind. I'm going to give them as traditional an upbringing as I possibly can. Honestly, any philosopher that stems from Plato's logic should be disregarded. Yeah, there's a reason the Apostle Paul spoke out so strongly against the empty talk of Greek philosophers in his books. With Kircher, a man can dream. A man can dream. Realize that technically does include Aristotle and like all of philosophy, Gigadramon. Yeah, there's a reason why the Bible calls the philosophers the empty-headed talk, and it likens philosophers to people who tickle the ears of the wise and powerful with things they want to hear. Given how much the newer generation has bastardized language and how words mean nothing, I can see what you were saying. Thank you, Azahara. Well, socialist doesn't always attack traditional values. Just look at any socialist dictator in South America. They adapt their doctrines according to the society they're trying to subvert. I mean, I agree. I will say this is very definitely applies to a more normal westernized attitude. In South America, it's a totally different picture. Like South Americans have a vastly different perspective on all of this. So, I mean, don't think that my advice applies universally. It really doesn't. I'm not trying to say, oh, I have all the answers, you must follow what I say in order to win. I'm just sharing my opinions. I'm just sharing my opinions. They're pretty strongly held opinions, but I have no desire to become some kind of, guru who tells people, yes, in order to defeat the woke mind virus, you must carefully study my carefully prepared list of rules and regulations that you can buy in book format for $14.99 on my website. No, I am never going to get as that enamored with the smell of my own farts. Thank you very much. No, I am just regurgitating information that far more intelligent people than me have gathered over a much greater period of time. Also, hello, Denna. Hello, Denna. Why am I being beeped immediately when I start doing stuff? Danny D, faith without works is dead. Yes, but you still need the faith. Yes, yeah, I agree. Aristotle is a total refutation of Plato. He doesn't stem from Plato in any meaningful sense. The world is real and the world is fake and only ideas are real and mutually contradictory. I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll admit I'm not quite as familiar with the old style like Aristotle and Plato as I should be. I need to go and look at them at some point. Definitely, I definitely should explore those particular philosophers at some point soon. Touch fluffy tail again, and if you see it history, many fascists became fascist after being commies or socialists. They just realized that different indoctrinations were required to F everyone over. I mean, that's literally what good grief, what's his name? All these foreign names. Let me just look it up right now. Essentials, because I can't remember which person it actually is. Books. That is really annoying. I can't find it. I'll have to look that up later. That's really bothering me. But anyway, instead of going on this tangent, I'm gonna close that, and I'm gonna move on to the more direct Warhammer thing as well, because I thought this article from PC Gamer was a very good summation of all the nonsense that we have to deal with right now. And it says Warhammer 40,000 has slightly more women in it now, and the neckbeards aren't happy. We're still not at female Space Marines, but give it time. I can actually zoom in a bit because my chat won't cut anything off. There we go. Since Warhammer 40k's 10th edition was released last year, each of the Wargames factions has been getting the traditional rules refresh in the form of a new codex book. The latest deals with the Adeptus Custodes, genetically engineered bodyguards of the Emperor, so gigantic they make Space Marines look weedy. There are 10,000 of them, and in the past they've only ever been depicted as men. In this latest iteration, shock horror, at least 2 of the Custodes are women. Most players seem to have responded to this by shrugging and getting back to arguing about the new rules, but there's always a vocal minority who go on a tear, and right already we have seen 2 major arguments that progressive infiltrators always use. First of all, they say, where is it? Yeah, it basically talks about the status quo. And it tries to normalize it. It says, oh, latest iteration shock horror in this sarcastic kind of way that's basically going, oh look, 10,000, there's 10,000 of them and 2 of them are women. Isn't that terrifying? Isn't that awful? What a massive thing to be angry about. And then it goes on to talk about vocal minorities. Vocal minorities is a massive leftist self-report because it's basically saying, there is no adversary. We're already accepted. Because remember, it's all about power. It's all about power. You can have 99.9% of a fan base aggressive against a change, but it will still be called a vocal minority because it's about power. It's no different from how Stalin, or was it Stalin or Lenin, who basically said, I'm in the minority in my party, but I'm going to call the opposite party the minority. Because the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, like the Bolsheviks basically means the majority, whereas the Mensheviks mean the minority, and the Mensheviks were the ones that were against Lenin. As I think, I may be getting that completely wrong. I do apologize if I've got it wrong. But I do know that's what he did. He basically named his major opposition party the smaller party. The Mail Online ran a typically subtle and understated headline that declared, "It's Wokehammer," and the meme community Grimdank has declared posts about femstodies will only be allowed for 1 week before they join female Space Marines as a banned topic. Games Workshop official response is a tweet that says, "In regards to female custodians, there have always been female custodians since the first of the 10,000 were created." Now, again, it's gone from... We're in the middle of the cycle right now. Because first of all, the argument is we're not doing it, and now we're on the part of we are doing it, but it's a good thing. Is this a retcon? Yep, and it won't be the last. Warhammer 40k has had fluid lore right from the start. The original Custodies were depicted as shirtless hunks who never leave Earth, a long way from the heavily armoured, galaxy-spanning golden gods they became, to say nothing of the tweaks to the 40k canon, like ditching half Eldar Space Marines and rewriting the Horus Heresy from a short story to a handful of pages long into a series of 60-plus novels. So once again, the disingenuous argument is completely transparent. They take logical and reasonable additions to canon to things that were never explained in the first place, and they compare it to just arbitrarily saying, yeah, this group that was always male and has been always referred to as male in every single edition suddenly has women in it, and this has always been the case. Chud. The Adeptus Custodes aren't 40k's only engineered super soldiers, of course. The setting's flagship faction are the Space Marines, who are created differently. Where Custodes are enhanced via a unique process begun when they're infants, Space Marines begin being grafted with a gene seed when they're on the verge of puberty. And while the explanation that Space Marine gene seeds are keyed to male hormones and tissue types goes back away, it's not the real reason Games Workshop made a whole army of dudes who are men. Touch Fluffy Tail. Fascism and communism only diverge in their ideology and values, but the methods and end result is the same. One kills Jews, the other the bourgeoisie. Arclight, the priest class has been replaced by the activist class. Activism is a business and needs to find issues with everything to survive. Touch Fluffy Tail. The bourgeoisie was always a code word for the Jews. Marx was a massive self-hating Jew. Yes. Yes, he was, which I find just absolutely hilarious. Socialists keep saying fascists are liars because the fascists were just very honest socialists. Socialists were totalitarians, fascists were just open about it. Yep, pretty much. I'm going to laugh if they just correct this by claiming there was a proofread error and it was Sisters of Silence that was properly referred to. I would laugh, but I mean, we all know that that wouldn't really be the case. We all know that that wouldn't be the case, tragically. As GW's former head of IP, Alan Merritt, once explained on Facebook, the reason there aren't female Space Marines has nothing to do with lore, or background, or character of Marines. It's to do with the simple logistics of making miniatures and selling miniatures. Source, I made it the fuck up. In the 1980s, GW sold miniatures in sets called blister packs, and as Merritt explained, the intention was that upwards of 25% of all models will be female. This is what we call a bare-faced lie. That didn't last because retailers kept complaining to us that customers weren't buying the female models and could we not include any in their restocks. And guys, by the time Warhammer 40k was designed, GW made sure its poster boys were, well, the boys to ensure they'd sell. As Merritt put it, all the background fluff about why there are only male Marines is there to justify a commercial logistics issue. And this paragraph makes absolutely no sense unless you go out of your way to justify it inside your own head. Because look at what Alan says up here. The intention was that upwards of 25% of all models would be female. And he says, we sold them in blister packs. So in other words, you get like 10 characters in a blister pack. And what you would assume would be logical is that 25% of those models would be female. And then he said, retailers kept complaining to us that customers weren't buying the female models and could we not include them in any of our restocks. Which doesn't make sense, because if they were mixed gender in the blister packs, then when you bought a blister pack, you wouldn't then say, I'm only going to use 80% or 75% of these models. Can I sell you back the 25% that I don't want? On the other hand, he could be saying that blister packs of all female characters were released, which is just bad marketing. Literally just bad marketing, because again, the groups, there are many groups in 40k that can have female characters. For example, like the Guard. The Guard is fully sexually integrated. You can be a male guardsman and you can be a female guardsman. And the male and female guardsmen are exactly alike in every way. There is no difference between a squad of female guardsmen and a squad of male guardsmen. So the way that I would imagine this would work is that you buy a blister pack of guardsman infantry, and 25% of those models would be female. Is they saying, yeah, it's a massive lie. GW started off with historical war games. Warhammer was the name of the entire game system. They used to have ancient battles in addition to fantasy and 40,000. Yeah. A retailer buying back products. This isn't just a lie, it's bad fan fiction. Yeah, it just makes absolutely no sense when you think about it on any level. It either the most generous and optimistic interpretation of this is that GW were a bunch of absolute morons who released blister packs of full female soldiers for some reason, instead of just mixing female minis into armies that would logically have female characters in them. Because it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. It makes no sense whatsoever, and again, the most generous interpretation is they had terrible marketing. Otherwise, it's just a lie. It's just a flat-out, unashamed lie. And the same was true of the Adeptus Custodes, until it wasn't. Though the customers at the average Warhammer shop are mostly men, these days there are usually 1 or 2 women as well. In other words, it's 1 or 2 men who decided they were women. And the men are a lot less likely to throw a hissy fit about having women in their armies than gamers in the 1980s, despite what Reddit and Twitter might suggest. Again, it's the vocal minority nonsense. They're even admitting that on Reddit, and Reddit is one of the most paused sites on the entire internet. So they're saying that Reddit, one of the most aggressively leftist hive minds in all the internet history, is overwhelmingly against this idea. All of 40k's lore and storytelling exists to provide context for selling toy soldiers to people. As the customer base changes, so too will that lore. And again, they're trivializing it. They are trivializing the reason. This is another leftist call-out. This is another leftist self-report, because they're saying, oh, it doesn't matter. Guys, you're just man-children and you're horrible chuds. If you think this is such a massive thing, why do you care? Again, why do you care so much? It's just a game. It's just a game, guys. Igatramon 6, sorry, I'm on a correction from poor wording. They made both fantasy and historical miniatures at first, not merely just the historical ones. Thank you for that clarification. You expect the lefty Jono to understand economics? Maniacal Foreigner, with how many women are into Gunpla, I wouldn't be surprised to meet a female Warhammer fan, honestly. Yeah, and this is another very good point, because Mobile Suit Gundam is a very masculine anime. In fact, I would legitimately say a lot of Mobile Suit Gundam's media is pretty misogynist. Like, Yoshiyuki Tomino is a very misogynistic man in a lot of ways. Now, let me just clarify. I think that Yoshiyuki Tomino comes across as misogynist because he is extremely autistic, and he has no idea how women think, and he writes both male and female characters as if they are insane. Like, Yoshiyuki Tomino's plots are insane, and all the characters in Yoshiyuki Tomino's animes and manga and everything are insane. And that's primarily why I like them. That's probably why I like Yoshiyuki Tomino's Gundam series and his storytelling, because the man is completely insane, and you just can never trust what on earth his characters are going to do next, because they all act like autistic 5-year-olds. Warhammer players hate women so much there that the 2 female-only armies in the game are some of the most popular. The true female fanbase was fine and happy with the way things are. UC is mainly devoid of women, but the side stories are Fujo bait. Yeah, but the side stories are their own thing made by completely different people. Is it masculine? Have you seen Seed and 00? a lot of female Gundam fans got in through Wingseed and Witch from Mars. I really dislike it's Witch from Mercury, by the way. I really dislike the Witch from Mercury now. It's a shame because like I have the 1/100 no grade Gundam Ariel model kit from that show, and that's a really really damn nice kit. I really hope they come out with a 1/100 scale Farract at some point, because the designs in Witch from Mercury are fantastic. I really like all of them. Well, most of them anyway. Like all the main suits, etc., are all really, really good, and I will definitely buy those. But I'm sorry, the whole Witch from Mercury stuff I could rant on about for like 10 hours. Mercury wasn't too bad. I strongly disagree. I think Witch from Mercury was terrible. Mercury, right? I got the first letter right at least. Let me be more accurate. I think that Witch from Mercury was great up until about episode 15 or 16. And after that, it just went downhill like a train wreck. Most Gundam series would have ended after one episode of the military would have locked the cockpits. Yeah, it's Gundam. It's Gundam. Let's not get too sidetracked with the whole Gundam stuff. Why is somebody pinging me in resources? What? Oh, that's quite interesting. Sorry, let me keep. Oh no, that is the end of the article. Sorry, I thought there was more of this. And like my commentary on all the Warhammer stuff. Let me go back to just chatting, so you're not flashbanged all the time. What I find upsetting about Warhammer is that, as a lot of people have pointed out, at this point, this is now a Gundam stream. Let's go. Sorry, no, the Gundam stream is going to have to wait. A Gundam stream could definitely be done at some point, because like I have watched so much Mobile Suit Gundam, and I have very strong opinions on many of the Gundam anime. I could definitely do like an easy 4 or 5 hour stream on Gundam as a whole. Let me just get my bottle of water out. But my final thoughts on the whole Warhammer situation is, I feel I commented on this a little bit in the Discord as well, that if I was a Warhammer fan right now, I would take this more as an opportunity than as a detriment. Because I feel that Warhammer has a big enough and a dedicated enough fan base that they can actually resist and fight back against what GW has in a very effective manner, simply by taking ownership of the property. Because Warhammer has things like resin models. There's a huge number of resin kit producers out there that are not affiliated with GW in any capacity, and are able to just manufacture their own lines of minis and models. Obviously, the rulebooks and everything are open source as soon as you open Yandex and look for them, or any other similar like torrent or Yihar Maharti's style site. So there's literally nothing stopping a Warhammer splinter group from just taking over a large amount of the disgruntled players and going, look, let's go and make our own version of this with beer and hookers. And I think they have the reach and they have the power to pull that off, and there's not really anything that GW can do to stop them. I mean, there's litigation and there's stuff like that, but again, I think you could do it in a way that both entices a large amount of players over and also sets up a self-sustaining level of investment in it. I remember the tank guy, concrete center divider. That's true to life, though. A lot of military vehicles are stored on bases totally unsecured. One guy got methed up and stole a tank and went on a rampage through San Diego with it. I agree. Touch Fluffy Tail, this is an opportunity to learn how to use a 3D printer. Yeah. But more than that, as a creative writer, I strongly believe that when you have an open source style setting, such as 40k, you should always go the fan-on route as much as possible. And you should organize with other writers, and you should explore the potential of that to create your own version of the setting, rather than just slavishly follow along with what the original content creators are going on about. They're going to make their own Warhammer with blackjack and hookers. Unironically, you could. Again, I'm not saying that it will happen, and I'm not saying it would be easy. What I am saying is that all of the resources for it to happen are out there, and I would say there is no better time for Warhammer fans to strike out on their own and not just make a protest against the company, but also have some damn good fun along with it. Because, as I was saying on the Discord, I think that one of the best ways you could possibly run a tabletop wargaming community that is so invested in the lore is to create lore based on player battles. And Warhammer tried to do that with their End Times, because I don't know the full details, but when Warhammer was destroying the old world, like in Warhammer Fantasy, they allowed a bunch of players to play battles that would influence the spread of chaos across the world, and then they shut it down because they realized the players were actually really damn good and they were winning against chaos when they were supposed to be losing. And they were winning so much that it actually looked like they could save the old world. Whereas GW was like, no, this setting comes to an end. We are not supporting it any longer. So we're going to stop doing this. And we are now going to just destroy the setting in the most asinine and retarded way possible. Which is why everybody hates the End Times. The problem is the GW and Black Library writing rooms are hard lefties like pronouns in bio. However, they kept modern politics out for decades. Yeah. But when you have the Splinter Group already happened when GW discontinued Fantasy, the game is called Kings of War. I might actually look into Kings of War, if that's the case. Yeah, Fantasy ended with the Orcs winning somehow. Sorry, let me just open my window because it's actually getting quite hot in here by now. There we go. I hope the ambience does not particularly change due to that. Just tell me if there's annoying noise from outside coming along, because I just open my window. Yeah. I will definitely look up Kings of War at some point if that's the case. But I would definitely like a splinter of 40k to gain some traction, because I really like 40k's setting. But I do think that at this point it's a bit like Star Wars, in that it is very bloated and top heavy, and unless you have an enormous amount of time and energy, it's very hard to even understand canon to any real degree. And I think it would be the prime time for somebody to come along and file some serial numbers off and make a new setting that is basically 40k, but better, and more concise, and more interesting, and more internally consistent. And I'd support that. I remember when War Machine / Hordes was coming up as a competitor to Warhammer. I don't know how it fell off so hard and so fast. I mean, I don't keep up too much with wargaming news. I'm definitely a tourist in all of this. Don't think that I'm an elite Warhammer, like Warhammer 40k fanboy or anything. I just happen to like the setting. I don't even know a vast amount about it, just the basics. And I know that I've played a couple of the games, but I've never actually had an army or anything like that. The companies are paused. Yeah, you need to gatekeep. You need to gatekeep. Sounds like good gatekeeping. Yeah, precisely. You need to gatekeep. But I want to move on from this now and look at something somewhat different. Actually, no, it's not somewhat different, because I forgot that I looked up this tweet. Allow me to just open something just quickly so that I can get it up on screen properly. Does he provide an original source? Of course he bloody doesn't. No. But this is Hypnotic on Twitter. What's your opinion on guys like Arch anyways? Just curious. I don't hate Arch or anything, but he runs with people like Dev and also people like and by Dev I mean Short Fat Otaku, and also who the hell is the other one? The guy who kept sending me DMs of porn. The Romanian TV. He runs with those two, and I think Arch isn't a bad guy, but he literally pays those two idiots to... Didn't realize you're streaming. What are you discussing? I'm talking about Warhammer a bit. But yeah, Arch is okay. I don't mind him, but the fact that he literally pays like Romanian TV and Short Fat Otaku V to come on his like podcast and everything, and He just ignores the fact that they're both massive drama whores. And he buys into the whole streamer blood sports. I would like him more if he was more principled, but I'm sorry, Arch strikes me as a guy who is views at any cost, and he's more than happy to let very controversial and very morally bankrupt people mess around with him because, hey, controversy views. And that's a problem that I have with a huge amount of the right-wing style commentary community, because they're all like that. If you want a really interesting shit show, look into the Faith McClonsky drama, a completely fake person who ran a harassment campaign against one of BattleTech's longest time writers. I have not looked at that. I would be quite interested into looking at that. Allow me to... Let me just take a quick screenshot of that comment and put it in my stream material so I can look it up later. Stream material, copy paste. There we go. Got a bunch of people joining the Discord. I'm impressed that people have actually figured out how to join the Discord now, because I still haven't put down... The reason I don't have a full link to my Discord in my stream description is simply because when I first created this channel, in order to put links in your YouTube description, you need a certain number of watch hours and a certain number of subscribers, which I did not have at that time. So I could just put the stuff without the HTTPS stuff that turned it into a link. Sorry, I'm going to belch. So I couldn't put a direct link to my Discord or anything like that. But I should update it at some point. One right-wing YouTuber I like for seemingly to just be an old dude discussing politics is Radical Liberation. Was just listening to his stuff on mutual aid societies right now until I saw your stream. Okay. I mean, I'm always interested in finding new people to watch, but sadly I've become very, very disappointed in an awful lot of commentary and discussion channels because I feel that they don't have any kind of strong internal logic and consistency to them. And it always comes back to October 7th when Gaza attacked Israel. Because before October 7th, I watched a huge number of people, well, not a huge number, like 5 or 6 different reasonably right-wing individuals on YouTube, mostly intellectuals, philosophers, and so on. And I remember before October 7th, all of them were very, very heavily pro-free speech. Why am I slurring so much tonight? I'm very sorry. And they would constantly podcast and talk about how important it was to have a free and open society where people were allowed to discuss all kinds of viewpoints. And it was the whole... I don't agree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. That Jordan Peterson quote. And when October 7th happened, I watched them all spontaneously flip round and say, actually, you know what? We've been wrong all of these years. We are terrified at the implications of this horrifying rise of anti-Semitist content that is spreading across the internet after October 7th. So we think now it's time to discuss common sense restrictions on free speech. And I was just like, I am never going to watch anything you produce ever again. Because I trusted you. I trusted that even though we disagreed on some things, you genuinely believed in the idea of free speech. But the moment you turn around and say, oh, now a group that I like is being oppressed or attacked, we need to censor things that critique them, you're a hypocrite. And I can't stand hypocrisy. Were you really surprised? In hindsight, I'm not. In hindsight, I really am not surprised. I shouldn't have been surprised. I am disappointed in myself for getting so invested in these people that I genuinely thought they had intellectual integrity. And now I just don't feel it. I don't feel they have any intellectual integrity at all. And I will talk to just about anyone. I mean, this is why I talk to people like Lennox, who is a very left-wing person. But I like her because she has integrity. Because she's sincere and she's honest and she's open. And she's willing to say, look, I believe these things, you believe these things, I don't agree with these things, but you know what? We've got common ground, so we can talk anyway. And that takes a lot of energy, and that takes a lot of effort. And she's had to defend herself multiple times from insane people on her own side going, how dare you talk to those kind of people? You should ban them instantly. You should never acknowledge them. You should never contact with them, or you should be absolutely 100% against them in every capacity all the time. And at the same time, she's had to deal with like right-wing people going, oh look, it's another stupid streamer with pronouns in bio. She's obviously a raging leftist who wants to slice off, you know, the penises of young boys and the breasts of young girls. You know, she must be like a genocidal maniac. So don't ever talk to her on any level. I'm just like, guys, can you all calm the fuck down for a second? I'm sick of people defending hypocrites just because they're on our side. Exactly. I will talk to anyone so long as they are not a hypocrite. And there are an awful lot of hypocrites out there, and hypocrisy is a universal thing, whether you are right, left, or, I don't know, some non-Euclidean dimension. Hypocrisy poisons debate more than anything else. Oh, sorry, I have to move my stuff around a little bit. My desk is getting a bit crowded. But let's go back to this. Hypnotic. People are fighting back in the mainstream gaming industry, so much so to the point Ubisoft has had to write an internal memo discouraging discourse in the fear of anti-DEI ideology spreading, aka diversity, equity, and inclusion. The storm is here, it will only get worse. You cannot quell it no matter how hard you try. Clean your desk, Proctor. I have, at the moment, I have a water bottle, I have a cup, I have another cup, so 2 cups. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, this is just a jar of water for some reason. I have 10 bottles of sauce on my desk. Oh no, 11, because I've got a thing of pepper here too. I also have a model kit. I also have, I've got a bag of apples. Oh, I've got my tablet here too. I've got my nice Opinel knife. I've got some tissues for blowing my nose. I've got a bunch of sanding sticks. I've got my nice little pair of nippers. I've got a bag of banana chips, and I'm pretty sure I've had them there since last year. And of course, I have my sprue clipping thing, and I also have several model kits sat on my desk. WTF, Y sauce? A jar of water. Clean your desk, Y sauce. At least you have a bottle of ketchup like your wife. I don't actually eat ketchup. What I have right here is a vampire relish, because yesterday there was a festival in a town that I can drive to, and they had a special stall set up for spices. And this guy only sells his spices at stalls and food festivals. And I bought something like 50 euros worth of spices off him. And it's, just give a shout out to Rufus Teague sauce. Because Rufus Teague is a bloody madman. Every single thing I have bought from the Rufus Teague brand of sauce is just absolutely mind-blowingly delicious. I could sip this stuff from a bottle all day. It's just amazing. Yeah, this is Rufus Teague Latino BBQ sauce. Tres chiles pica delice. This is 3 peppered sweet heat, and it is zesty lime with smoky chipotle, arbol, and hatch peppers. And it's gorgeous. It is absolutely incredibly delicious. And also, the second Rufus Teague bottle I have on my desk is Rufus Teague Latino BBQ sauce, Diablo Limonato, or Limon Ajo, Limonajo. This one is lemon, garlic, and fiery peppers. Yeah, lemon, garlic, hatch chilies, cayenne, and authentic spices. And that is gorgeous. That is just absolutely delicious. VTuber doxing themselves by mentioning local brand Mortal 11. I mean, I don't care. I live in Ireland. I live in Southern Ireland. And again, I really don't care if people know where I live because I live in rural Ireland. So, yeah, I don't think I'm going to have any VT hate squads doing a drive-by on my house anytime soon. And I also bought his Vampire Relish Hot Tomato Salsa, and that is just so gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I also bought his Buffalo Sauce. Ooh, so good. It's all just so delicious. Lumi, right, mine's a mess too, just no foodstuffs. I mean, all the sauces that I've got about 30 sauces on a desk behind me. The thing is, because this is my shed and it's a bit improvised, my sauces, yeah, Rufus Teague is everywhere. I'm glad that he does get a decent amount of exposure because Rufus Teague brand is fantastic. It's fantastic. Like, I will shill for them. If Rufus Teague wants to sponsor this stream, I will take his money because Rufus Teague is just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous sauce. Oh yes, I've got 4 more model kits on my desk in various positions as well. And just above my desk is all of my painting supplies. Yeah, my desk is a bit crowded, a little bit crowded, I will admit. But it's organized chaos. It's 100% organized chaos, I promise. I'm not the kind of person who has, like, moldy food tins or anything on my desk. Ryan again saying, after stream, see here. Okay, that's quite interesting. Someone just joined the Discord with the news about Marina. That would be very interesting. But anyway, let's get on and read this. Oh, 1 nanosecond. Yep, we're good. This is from The Quartering. Now, The Quartering is a guy who I used to very much loathe and despise. Bloody hell! A mosquito literally just flew directly into my face. Go and get caught in a spider's web, you asshole. Bottle says if he was still around, so he's kind of too dead to get your sponsorship. That's goddamn annoying. That's a shame. Well, his brand is still around, and I hope it stays around. But yeah, The Quartering is a guy who I've actually gained a bit more respect for recently because I knew him as, you know, the joke was the Quarter Pounder because he was an angry, like, ex-Magic the Gathering fat guy who was very angry and stupid on the internet. He started a whole load of pointless beef with a bunch of people, and he got clowned on an awful lot. But he's actually seemed to have come around a fair bit and gotten himself a bit more sense in his head. And he's also lost a lot of weight, so fair props to him. I think The Quartering is... I mean, I'm not saying that he's good now, but I'm certainly saying The Quartering has measurably improved since I first saw him. Jeremy is a chameleon, don't take anything he says seriously. I'm not going to... I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue again. I'm not endorsing him or anything. I'm just saying that I used to know him as much worse. And Jeremy isn't that bad, to be honest. Yeah, it's like I said, if a guy can lose weight, like he has and seems to have gotten himself into vastly better shape, good for him, I'm never going to complain when somebody improves their life. So this is part of the memo, so I'll read it now. First, we want to make it very clear that we do not accept hate, harassment, and other forms of abuse in any way, and we are deeply saddened to see the negativity and hatred currently spreading on our co-workers' personal profiles and on our and our other partners' social media platforms. We are proud to represent the diversity and inclusion that exists in society as part of our everyday work. Representation is part of our DNA and will remain that way regardless of external pressure or influences. If you are exposed to or witness any negative behaviors towards your colleagues online, do not hesitate to reach out to your management, Arcade HR, or the communications team. We are here to help. Should a situation escalate to a point where you feel unsafe, please contact the Ubisoft Security and Risk Management team at sent an email. SRM has a team of dedicated staff to manage security concerns. They will assess the severity of the situation and provide personalized guidance. As always, report immediate and severe personal safety concerns to your local emergency number. Given the current polarization of this topic online, we believe that having a respectful and constructive dialogue is difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. That's because you don't want a respectful and constructive dialogue, you just want to tell us what to do. In this context, we ask you not to engage in or interact with these conversations, as this could worsen the situation for yourself, our teams, and our industry peers. You can also set your accounts to private and or turn off private messages from people who are not in your list of trusted friends. Do this across your social media accounts, even if you are only receiving unwelcome messages on certain platforms. Ubisoft stands firmly for diversity and inclusion in our workplace and our games, and we believe there is no room for hate in gaming, which is why that Ubisoft's gaming is complete and total shit. None of them have ever been anything like unsafe. That's their whole problem. Part of our DNA, that sounds like the words that Bridge used. Yeah, exactly. This is a Bridge comment. I'm not going to rant about Bridge because that's kind of Kirsch's thing, but yeah, Bridge is the next evolution of DEI. He looked huge when he was on Crowder last week. Guys who lose weight are on the right side of history, Proctor 2024. I agree. If I am against all forms of aggressive social intervention by arbitrary power bodies. At the same time, I do genuinely believe that fat people ought to be charged more for food than thinner people. I think that every supermarket ought to have a weigh-in machine. And when you walk into that supermarket and you are weighed automatically by the machine, your prices go up depending on how overweight you are. Unless you're buying healthy options. That is one form of social control I would be 100% okay with. You're perfectly free to call me a hypocrite. I don't mind that. But I would laugh at that kind of thing. I would be happy to. I would be happy to see that form of social compulsion. And clothes, yeah, and clothes, and airline piloting, and public transport. If you are fat, and you are so fat you take up more than your fair share, pay for it. Pay for it. And as Black Number 1 said, none of them have ever been anything like unsafe. That's their whole problem. I agree. And I think actually this is a psychological study that has been conducted multiple times. Basically, people experience the same levels of stress and de-stress when they are in negative situations that is proportionate to their previous experience of negative situations and positive situations. It was determined that, for example, people who are used to the idea of first-class service on flights feel no additional pleasure or happiness from that first-class material than somebody who is used to traveling third class. Because over time, your brain simply gets used to the new luxuries, and so it becomes normal for you. And the same is true in reverse. If you lead such a coddled life that you are totally unused to stress, then the smallest amount of stress will become a major thing for you. And these people... leftists tend, or at least intellectual leftists, tend to be very privileged people. And I found it very interesting what Abigail Shrier in her book about transgender, I've got the full title of it here, it's a fairly long title, but yeah, Abigail Shrier, Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze that is that is destroying our young daughters, or something like that. And what Abigail Shrier found in her research on the phenomenon of transsexuality in young girls was that the average girl who was coming out as transsexual was among the most privileged and coddled kind of child. In fact, they were so coddled and they were so innocent that the average transgender daughter had, at age 14 or 15, had never even masturbated. And that's just crazy to think about. That's just crazy to think about, that these young girls were so completely divorced from how the world actually worked that they hadn't even discovered their own bodies at that point. And so because they were so innocent, they saw no issue in the idea of changing their gender, because they did not have the experience of what it was actually like to be a woman in any meaningful, tangible way that gave them the ability to cherish and enjoy their femininity. They just saw it as a negative when they hit puberty, and, puberty is a very stressful thing for every child, much more so for women than for men. I just wish fat deterrence didn't come in the form of a sugar tax, which makes companies put a bunch of artificial sweeteners in drinks that are even worse for you than sugar and taste like shit. I agree. I hate artificial sweeteners. I tried to cut sugar out of my coffee at one point and replace it with artificial sweeteners. It was disgusting. If you've never had the journey, how do you know what you like or don't with your own body? Note, nobody can ever... I don't think that's in question. Don't worry about this. My audience would definitely agree with you, Black Number One. I don't think you've been here before. Cool Foreigner, we are the hollow men. We are the stuffed men. If you're American, you are already. Fat people tax needs to be higher to make them reconsider eating a triple meat, triple cheeseburger with a Diet Coke. Yeah, food regulations are some of the necessary stuff. Otherwise, you would drown in unhealthy slop. Just 1 second. I'm going to close my window again because I'm now getting flooded with a massive horde of insects. 2 seconds. Oh. Oh, there we go. I think I'll take off my top as well because it really is getting very warm now. They are letting children just never grow up, and some of them are in their 30s now, living in a pure fantasy world. Yeah, one of the examples in Abigail Schreier's book was a daughter that is exactly like I've described. That she grew up in a very loving, a very supportive family. And what Abigail Schreier said was the mother was somebody who was always there for her daughter. And what her mother would do is that every time her daughter developed a new interest, the mother would share that interest. For example, if her daughter was into a certain film series or something, the mother would be into it as well. Same with books, same with toys, same with fads on the internet, etc. And so, on the surface, this was an extremely good childhood where the child was indulged and was living a stress-free life. But the moment she hit puberty and started going to school, she declared that she was, well, not the moment, but shortly after she began going to, well, basically a woke Californian school, she first came out as a lesbian and then she came out as trans. And her parents tried to support her for a long time, but then they began to go against her. And in the end, they gave her an ultimatum that you either drop this trans stuff or you leave. And so, of course, their daughter left. And she actually moved across the entirety of America, from California to New York State. And she began living as a male in New York State. And the thing was, during all this time, her parents were still paying for her college tuition, and they were still paying her rent for her in New York City from their own savings. And as Abigail Schreier commented, every time their daughter pushed against them, they yielded. She was completely accommodated in everything, and so why would she ever take it seriously when her parents said, we don't think this trans thing is a good thing for you, we would like you to stop? And in fact, there was this horrible example in this book about this case where the daughter decides to get top surgery, basically cut off her breasts, for those who don't know, because she was convinced that she was a man. And her father phoned her up and said, if you do this, this is the end of our relationship. I will no longer support you in any way. And the daughter went and got her breast cut off. And she posted about it on Instagram, and she talked about how good she felt and how amazing it was, and just complete and total disregard for what her father said. And her father continued to pay for her college tuition afterwards, and he continued to pay her rent. He couldn't bring himself to cut her off, even after she did that to him. And in a world where children are taught you can do absolutely anything, and your parents will at best say they'll do something but never do it, why would they ever change? Why would they ever stop? And Touch Fluffy Tail says, the problem is that young people are not experimenting and discovering what they are and like in a healthy way. They get a phone from daddy, go to Discord, and get manipulated by the alphabet people. Yeah. Yeah, there is a total disconnect between parents and the internet, which absolutely must change. It's why I consider myself a decent candidacy for fatherhood, because I know how the internet works. And there is no way in hell my child is ever going to get a mobile phone or access to the internet unsupervised until they are old enough to actually understand what it's like. Weak men creating hard times. Absolutely. This was a weak man. I feel very sorry for him, but he brought this on his own head. It's that simple. It's all so tiresome. I think that's just the same thing again. Yes, it is. Right. So that's those 3 tabs out of the way. And speaking of schools, I found this story on Twitter to be quite entertaining. It's been up for a while, but I would like to cover it. This is Yang. Have I still got the thing? Yes, I do. And he said, The New Yorker publishes the wild tale of how an affluent liberal town's school district imploded after numerous intersectional pile-ups over race and gender identity. Oh, I love this one. This is a particularly funny one for me. Amherst is a very liberal town with the stereotypical "in this house" signs everywhere. The local high school newspaper published an article about the life or death nature of the failure to protect trans kids. Amherst in Wexton, Massachusetts is the nexus of 4 liberal arts colleges and a major public university. It is home to about 40,000 people, including a fluctuating population of undergraduates and grad students. On its woodsy, winding residential streets, Black Lives Matter and "In This House" signs sprout alongside native gardens of holly, bayberry, and mountain laurel. In the 2020 election, more than 90% of the town's voters went for Joe Biden. I can see the problem already. A joke you hear a lot is that in Amherst only the H is silent. It's a town known for raucous debate and lefty political infighting. The snake eats its own tail. Still, even by these disputatious standards, the arguments that have been carrying on around Amherst Regional Middle School, or ARMS, have been vociferous. How and when they started depends on whom you ask, but they broke into wider public view last May, when Amherst's high school newspaper, The Graphic, published a 5,000-word article headlined, "It's Life or Death, Failure to Protect Trans Kids at ARMS, a Systematic Problem." The piece anonymously quoted several trans and gender non-conforming students who recounted numerous instances of bullying and harassment, harmful encounters with guidance counselors, and fruitless complaints to administrators. And this is another great example of the revolution must always move further left. Because in this town, 90% of the voters are hardcore ride-or-die leftists. And yet, somehow, in this space, there are still trans children that are being scared to death. You get what you deserve. And how is it? You have to ask yourself logically, when is it enough? When has enough been done to protect trans children? And the answer is never. This is something that every person who wants to engage in a dialogue with progressive ideals must understand. There is no stopping point. The revolution must always move further left. Even in places where it is already incredibly left, that simply becomes the ruling class at the time. It doesn't matter what they are. They can be conservative or liberal. They are still the ruling class. And the ruling class, by definition, is what the revolution is seeking to overthrow. And so it doesn't matter if the revolution overthrows the conservative working class the ruling class. And the ruling class now becomes liberal and progressive. Those new liberal and progressives are just the next turning of the wheel. The next revolution will be against those who are insufficiently liberal and progressive. And when those people are turned out and more progressive people come into power, then the wheel simply turns again. And so they become even more liberal and more progressive. You can't ever win. Among the article's striking details was that at a prayer meeting at school, a guidance counselor reportedly said, "In the name of Jesus, we bind that LGBTQ gay demon that wants to confuse our children." The counselor later denied making this comment. That same staffer, the piece alleged, handed out chocolate crucifixes to students. An uncomfortable fact was that most of the concerned parents were white, and the two counselors under scrutiny were not. One of them, Hector Santos, is Latino, and the other, Delinda Dykes. You can't make this up. Cunningham, who is black, was the district's head of diversity, equity, and HR. Morris, the superintendent, is white. At the school committee meeting, which lasted nearly 6 hours, good grief, I hope they had a food break, one of the few people who spoke in Cunningham's defense was her son, who had worked at ARMS as a student support specialist. For a prime example of how women of color get treated in leadership positions, he told the crowd, I say look no further than Amherst Public Schools. The troubles at ARMS, he insisted, were not about the rainbow situation, but rather the product of an unusually combative teachers' union and ordinary racism. Delinda must be one of them dykes. The trans children thing always puts me off. I feel like someone who makes that decision should be an adult. Yeah. Yeah. No, I've already read that. The ongoing fight in Amherst seems to press against every bruise that public schools have sustained in recent years, and the continued fallout, multiple investigations, resignations, a persistent leadership vacuum in the schools, doesn't inspire confidence in our collective capacity to work through the inevitable frictions of a pluralistic society. Even in a liberal and largely affluent district, certain conflicts and tensions have come to feel unresolvable. As one person I spoke to in town told me, the left is eating its own all over the country. It's not just Amherst. I also realize I don't have streamer mode turned on, so I'm sorry about that beeping noise. 1 second. Why on earth does my Discord suddenly not enable streamer mode whenever I'm doing things? Let me just look at this 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Many people I spoke to alleged that both Dykes and Santos brought religion into the school. The damn Dykes! They brought religion into the school! Dykes told colleagues and students that she would pray for them, or, if they were facing some dilemma, ask if they had prayed on it. According to the Title IX investigation, Santos brought up the Bible and Jesus when speaking with students. That horrible Dyke. What is it with the lesbians and Jesus? Lesbians for Jesus. I'm sorry. I just can't. The article in the graphic noted a cartoon that Santos had shared on Facebook, showing a hand with stigmata. That's the wounds of Christ, by the way. That in case people who are not Christian think like stigmata is the wounds that Christ received when the nails were driven through his body. Protecting two children from a downpour of rainbow-colored paint, along with text in Spanish that read, "If my 4-year-old son tells me that he wants to dress up as a princess, I will tell him no, because he was born a boy and boys are princes." This is one based dyke. The dyke's sincerity in trying to get it right on behalf of trans kids would ultimately come into serious doubt. But there were other regrettable instances in which the culprit may have been simple human error and the ordinary bureaucratic disarray of any sizable public school. Joe changed their name twice in minuscule? Why am I... Good grief, I am very sorry. For some reason, I am just mumbling my words for a strange reason. In middle school, and the district was slow to correct their name in its databases. As a result, Joe's mother said Joe spent most class periods that had substitute teachers in the student support center because they could not deal with the constant misgendering and dead naming. When a substitute teacher mistakenly used the wrong name and pronouns for another non-binary student, whom I'll call Casey, the student's mother wrote to staffers, "I want to make sure they are not exposed to the teacher again, in any setting." The sub was assigned to Casey's class at least twice more in later months. This, Casey's mother wrote, caused frequent panic attacks and missed school time. Sorry, I went down a little bit too far. Let me just look back at chat for a second. People's attractions are built on social conditioning, and due to that, I find white women unattractive for their rampant leftism. And Luminous, hardly anyone makes that decision by themselves or with full information of the risks, so I personally don't even trust adults with it, but restricting stuff for adults is also infringing on their right. Panic attacks, yeah, panic attacks from being called the wrong name, and these people are just so fragile. Again, and it is a symptom of coddling. They have never had any stress or pain or denial or frustration in their lives. And so something as tiny as being called by the wrong name makes them incredibly, incredibly upset. Oh, hello, Rima Evenstar. Nice to see you in my chat again. Proctor suffered repeated mini strokes on stream today. As someone who actually has suffered panic attacks, go F yourself. Yeah, it's just... It's very depressing. It's very, very depressing. There's a tiny bit to that. Yeah. Instances... Joe and their mother continue to report instances of alleged bullying and harassment to various staffers at ARMS. Although one boy received a suspension, Joe and their mother were dismayed that the school did not mete out more consequences. I mean, to be blunt here, this is no issue. This is not an issue with it being a progressive school or anything. All schools are just... There must be some reason why schools are so bad at dealing with bullying on any level, because it's something that seems to be completely universal to the condition of the education system. It doesn't matter if it's a leftist school, it doesn't matter if it's a right-wing school, it doesn't matter if it's a fundamentalist school, a Jewish school, a Muslim school. They all have bullying, and they all have bullying on a level where you would think it would be completely unmissable, but it just happens anyway. But this doesn't help, as I can see. Like many other progressive school districts, Amherst uses restorative justice practices which prioritize mediation and reconciliation over punishment as part of an effort to redress racial disparities in the disciplinary process. What's unique about Amherst is that there are racial and class dynamics that layer on top of the gender dynamics, and those have certain demographic tendencies. A longtime administrator at Amherst told me, Joe and Casey are white, and boys accused of bullying them and other trans students at ARMS are mostly black and Latino. So, what they're literally saying is, I mean, this is just such a perfect example of the leftist attitudes tying itself in knots, because on the one hand, they're like, we're being inclusive and progressive. We're tearing down the walls. We're making sure that people feel equal and included. And then they say, oh, these problems are because some of the students are white and some of them are black and Latino. You can't have it both ways. You can't categorize people in that way and say, oh, it's because of their fundamental characteristics, while also pursuing a system of teaching which is designed from the ground up to make those differences not mean anything because you're all equal. It's just a fundamental clash that you can't get over. Sorry, I just have replied to something on Discord. Post this after stream. There were even accusations of witchcraft being thrown. The school district is near where the Salem witch trials took place, so perhaps it's fitting. Dykes also allegedly told colleagues that one teacher was practicing seances and witchcraft right in this school. Dykes denied making this charge against her colleague, adding, "If she practices witchcraft, that's her prerogative." The investigation suggested that Cunningham was involved in the creation of a flyer which circulated at the May school committee hearing, accusing arms teachers of witchery and other transgressions. Cunningham denied this. After Martha Toro, a retired Amherst teacher, published an open letter critical of the hiring process instituted under Cunningham, Dykes, according to multiple sources, said that Toro was attempting to start a race war. Dykes denied this. Black staff members who received complaints often accused others of racism, which is the worst thing someone can be accused of in this town. Let me just look back at chat for a second. These kids are seeking boundaries and leadership and a strong guiding hand, and can't find one. I agree, Black number 1. Mandatory education. If you expel someone, he has no place to go, so the school is obligated to keep him. A lot of these kids are starting to push back. I love my Latinx brothers. Call me a slur, not Latinx. Lumi, don't worry. We don't lose Latinx any longer. We use Latine, okay? It's all better now. There's no problem with that. They have no problem expelling a white kid for calling out the woke BS. Colored kids are harder for them to expel. Yeah, I'm unironically angry about leftist white women appropriating witch culture. According to the investigation, Cunningham frequently accused colleagues of racism and at least once engaged in retaliation against an employee who had made a complaint against Dykes. Cunningham insisted to me that this finding was totally inaccurate and that she objected to being implicated at all. I didn't work with kids, she said. Why am I involved in a Title IX investigation? The investigation described a culture of fear and intimidation at arms. Some staffers were frightened into silence by a fear of being labelled a racist. Mayfield agreed with this assessment. The worst thing you can be called in Amherst is racist, and it keeps people stuck, she told me. That is what kept Doreen, Delinda, and Hector in their positions much longer than they should have been. So basically, to summarize for those who are lost, we have Black and Latina, or Latino, I'm not precisely sure if some of these people are Latinos, people who are in administrative or teaching positions at this school, using the fact that they are of a certain racial background to get away with things that are more right-wing than their left-wing colleagues would allow, and then saying, yeah, this is a left-wing district, and if you attack us for any reason, that's you being racist, and using... That's Title IX. Sorry, I didn't know if it was supposed to be pronounced that way or not. The whole thing sounds like a teenage television drama, a concatenation of the most ludicrous accusations and consequences, waiting for the reveal that some anarchist punk is setting up both sides. That would be hilarious. That would be completely hilarious. So I'm just replying to somebody. I have something that I'm going to be posting on the forum, by the way, that I've been sent, and that's what I was replying to. Based, using the same talking points against them. Yeah, it is a good way to fight back against this kind of nonsense. Meanwhile, members of POSH, the Anti-Sexual Harassment Club, brought complaints that one of their teachers was commenting inappropriately in class about students' race, weight, and clothing. A district investigation found that the claims were unsubstantiated. The teacher, who is black, filed a formal complaint against the club's faculty advisor, who is white, alleging that she used her power as the advisor of Posh to commit racist and sexist attacks on me. The advisor was briefly placed on paid leave, then moved to a new role at the high school. In January, members of the union filed a grievance asking, among other things, that Posh stop meeting. They also proposed appropriate consequences and further education for students who have been engaged in bullying of staff. and as Yang ups here says, black staff members who received complaints often accused others of racism, which is the worst thing someone can be accused of in this town. And this is the end of the article. Unfortunately, it's not too long. At the January school committee meeting, Gail Brissett refuted the allegations about the restorative justice circles and suggested that the criticisms of her work were racially motivated. There have been whispers that some members in the middle school community are intent on removing people of color, especially black people, from leadership positions, she said, adding that, in her view, a very important social justice issue of our time, that is, inclusion and justice for the rainbow community, is being weaponized. A high school staffer who spoke in support of Gail Brissett was more blunt. Amherst is racist, the staff is racist, and there's a target on the back of black people in the district. In the end, Gail Brissett decided not to take the job after all. The article ends by noting that there is still much infighting between issues of race versus gender identity. One wonders which side will prevail. Oh, article with more details. I did not see this before. Is this going to be paywalled? No, it's not. That is a very long article. I'm not reading all of this. Feck off. Maybe I'll do a follow-up for this on Wednesday, because I find this extremely entertaining personally. Allow me to look back at chat. Posh, you can't make this up. Dykes and Posh, this is solid gold. Welcome to 2024, where being racist is worse than being a gangbanger. This all reminds me of that hilarious and terrifying DSA convention back in 2019 where they kept triggering each other. It's horrifying that this is now out in the open everywhere and endorsed. Magdalenus Rex, can you give me more information about that DSA convention? I very vaguely know what you're talking about, but if there's like a link to an article I could read about it, I would be very, very interested. In the meantime, I'm just going to quickly look up something because I'm certain... what on earth would I title this search? Like, leftist town taken over Muslims who... Because this reminds me very strong. Ah, yes. Here it is. This is a Guardian article. I mean, it's funny when the Guardian admits stuff like this because it's very funny. This article is more than 10 months old. Yeah, I think this is relevant because it highlights a very similar situation that is basically what happens every time these policies of like restorative justice and so on. I won't do that because I want to read that later. These restorative justice policies are actually put into effect. A sense of betrayal, liberal dismay as Muslim-led U.S. city bans pride flags. Many liberals celebrated when Hamtramck, Michigan, elected a Muslim-majority council in 2015, but a vote to exclude LGBTQ+ flags from city property has soured relations for some strange reason. In 2015, many liberal residents in Hamtramck, Michigan, celebrated as their city attracted international attention for becoming the first in the United States to elect a Muslim-majority city council. They viewed the power shift and diversity as a symbolic but meaningful rebuke to the Islamophobic rhetoric that was a central theme of then presidential candidate Donald Trump's campaign. This week, many of those same residents watched in dismay as a now fully Muslim and socially conservative city council passed legislation banning pride flags from being flown on city property that had, like many others being flown around the country, been intended to celebrate rainbow community. Muslim residents I'm not going to say that on YouTube. Muslim residents packing City Hall erupted in cheers after the council's unanimous vote. And on Ham Truck social media pages, the taunting has been relentless. Gayless City read one post, emphasized with emojis of a bicep flexing. Rima, I have an unrelated question. Why do I keep seeing gay comments about you on the forums? Look at my avatar. just look at my avatar that I, for some reason, have been persuaded to use. What am I? Oh, that's sorry, the wrong tab. In a tense monologue before the vote, council member Mohammed Hassan shouted his justification at Rainbow supporters. I'm working for the people, what the majority of the people like. While Hamtruck is still viewed as a bastion of multiculturalism, the difficulties of local governments and living among neighbours with different cultural values quickly set in following the 2015 election. Some leaders and residents are now bitter political enemies engaged in a series of often vicious battles over the city's direction, and the pride flag controversy represents a crescendo in tension. Remember, diversity is our strength. There's a sense of betrayal, said the former Hamtruck mayor, Karen. They literally had a Karen as a mayor. Majewiski, who is Polish-American. We supported you when you were threatened, and now our rights are threatened, and you're the one doing the threatening. For about a century, Polish and Ukrainian Catholics dominated politics in Hamtruck, a city of 28,000 surrounded by Detroit. By 2013, largely Muslim Bangladeshi and Yemeni immigrants supplanted the white Eastern Europeans, although the city remains home to significant populations of these groups, as well as African Americans, whites, and Bosnian and Albanian Americans. According to a 2020 census, some 30% to 38% of Hamtruck's residents are of Yemeni descent, and 24% are of Asian descent, largely Bangladeshi. I swear there's something in the water tonight for me to be mumbling my words so much. After several years of diversity on the council, some see irony in an all-male Muslim elected government that does not reflect the city's makeup. And this is quite hilarious for The Guardian to be admitting this. This is why I chose The Guardian article, because The Guardian article itself talks about this. Whereas, if anybody doesn't know, The Guardian is an incredibly progressive left-leaning outlet. And for them to be saying this kind of thing really shows how bad the problem has gotten. The resolution, which also prohibits the display of flags with ethnic, racist, and political views, comes at the time when rainbow rights are under assault worldwide, and other cities have passed similar bans, with the vast majority being driven by often white politically conservative Americans. It's almost as if politically conservative Americans have more in common with Muslims than leftists. I just can't imagine why. While the situation in Hamtruck largely evolved in its own local dynamics, some outside right-wing agitators connected to national Republican groups have been pushing for the ban on Hamtruck's social media pages and voiced support for it at Tuesday's meeting. They are from nearby Dearborn, where they were part of an effort last year to ban books with rainbow themes. Their talking points mirror those made elsewhere. Some Hamtruck Muslims say they simply want to protect children, and gay people should keep it in their home. But that sentiment is an erasure of the queer community and an attempt to shove queer people back in the closet, says Gracie Cardiao, a queer Hamtruck resident who is part of the anti-transphobic action group. Mayor Amir Ghalib, 43, who was elected in 2021 with 67% of the vote to become the nation's first Yemeni-American mayor, told The Guardian on Thursday he tries to govern fairly for everyone, but said rainbow supporters had stoked tension by forcing their agendas on others. And when a Muslim person is talking about a group forcing their agenda on others... There is an overreaction to the situation, and some people are not willing to accept the fact they lost, he said, referring to Mayuski and recent elections that resulted in full control of the council by Muslim politicians. Though the city's Muslims are not a monolith, and some privately told The Guardian they were frustrated with the council, the only leader to publicly question it was the former city council member Amanda Jakowski, a Polish-American who converted to Islam. In a statement, she raised concerns about the move's legality. There are far too many questions to pass this today with any semblance of responsibility. On one level, the discord that has flared between Muslim and non-Muslim populations in recent years has its root in a cultural clash that is unique to a partly liberal, small US city now under conservative Muslim leadership, residents say. Last year, the council approved an ordinance allowing backyard animal sacrifices. Majewski, if you're pronouncing it like an American. Majewski, if you're pronouncing it correctly. I sincerely apologize for Polish Americans. We disavow their lot completely. Let me scroll up a little bit. Leftists, oh boy, we sure do love sowing. Also leftists, oh dear God, we hate reaping. For America, this was a headline article. For Europe, it was Tuesday. This first smokeless city, very progressive. It shows how bigoted the left is. They don't even bother learning the values of the minorities they support. Don't listen to him, he likes it. It's 2024, being gay is stunning and brave. Look, it is not my fault that for some reason I am magnetically attractive to Fujoshis, alright? It is not my, God damn it. Congratulations on being the first Yemeni mayor. What's your first course of action? Oppression and animal sacrifice. I don't know what it is with Brits and Americans of Polish heritage going woke so easily, given how conservative Poland still is by modern European standards. I mean, the thing is that in my experience, it's the same. I used to watch a fair number of Polish and other Eastern European political commentators, and my opinion on the matter is they seem to be extremist in both ways. They tend to either be ultra hyper conservative or ultra hyper communist, and there's almost nothing in between. And the weird thing is they can often flip between the two. Like one year they can be incredibly conservative and the other year they can be incredibly communist. I feel that this is just a theory. I feel as if they have a separation between their personal viewpoints and the kind of state viewpoints, and they're used to they simultaneously have like the small family group politics and also the larger cultural politics, and they seem to think that they can be one, that if they're on one side in like big like capital P politics, but on another side in their like local family politics, there's no clash to it. Yeah, Poles being extremely hot or cold with no middle ground is kind of a running theme in the history of Poland. Poland still has legitimized blasphemy punishments. I completely see why people that break free go to a radical opposite. Yeah, I mean, it's in Eastern European blood, honestly. I know quite a few Eastern Europeans, and it doesn't tend to lend themselves to moderate viewpoints. And I should really do, it's like my Slav speech thing. Don't think that's been reposted in a while, but it's still completely true. There's no such thing as a moderate Slav, ever. If the only moderate Slavs are the dead ones. When Michigan legalized marijuana, it gave municipalities a late 2020 deadline to enact a prohibition of dispensaries. Hamtruck Council missed the deadline and a dispensary opened, drawing outrage from conservative Muslims who demanded city leadership shut it down. That ignited counter-protests from many liberal residents, and the council only relented when it became clear it had no legal recourse. At other times, the issues are not unique to Hamtruck. In the realm of local politics, personal fights among neighbors, warring factions, and dirty politics are a common part of the democratic process across the US. I don't know that we're really all that different from other cities in most ways, Miowski said. However, race and religion add more fraught layers to Hamtruck's issues. Islamophobia exists there, and some Muslims say that they saw bigotry in local voter fraud investigations and in rainbow supporters not respecting their religion. What a massive shock. But Majowski said the majority is now disrespecting the minority. She noted that a white Christian majority city council in 2005 created an ordinance to allow the Muslim call to prayer to be broadcast from the city's mosques 5 times daily. It did so over objections of white city residents, and Majowski said she didn't see the same reciprocity with roles reversed. Ghalib disagreed and labelled the prayer broadcast a First Amendment issue, while noting no one was asked for City Hall to broadcast the calls. Moreover, the white majority council was not always hospitable to Muslim residents who previously faced overt racism, and with a majority Muslim council in place, more Muslims had been appointed to boards and commissions and hired in City Hall. So had some Rainbow residents, Ghalib added. Despite the political clashes, he thinks there is hope for Hamtruck to live up to its multicultural ideals. We can get along and people are not violent here, he said. Kadiao agreed peaceful coexistence was possible. We aren't in the business of excluding people from our society, and I'm not going to exclude socially conservative Muslims. They have a place at the table just like everyone else. However, they cannot and will not shove another community out of the way. There's an old saying that God must have put the Poles between the Germans and the Russians and gave them vodka to keep them from taking over the world. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was the first major republic in Europe, and they democratically voted to re-implement serfdom in Poland. The Polish right-wing party that's been in power until recently were basically populists throwing money around to secure small town and countryside votes, I see. Yeah, the Poland thing is very interesting to me. Like, Slavic culture as a whole, I find very interesting. But, you know, in summary of that article, as was said earlier, it's a case of they reaping what they've sown. You can't put a group of people whose fundamental viewpoints differ from yours in charge just because you feel guilty of having power over them. The concluding piece reads as, all of this subversion to American standards is very blatant, but whites are bad too. Yeah. And we see this happen, it strikes close to home because this happens in Europe all the time, is that Muslims are allowed to do things that white people simply aren't. And the double standard is very blatant, and it's very well known, and it's very common. And it feels... If you convert to Islam, you can Oshi more than one VTuber. But for my own input, my attitude has always been, you can't really condemn another culture until your own culture is worth saving. And right now, traditional values in the West are at an all-time low. It doesn't matter whether they're secular or religious. And I think that one of the main reasons why Western culture has been so easy to subvert is the fact that values are simply not there any longer. It reminds me of Ireland, because Ireland, when I arrived here in the 90s, was an incredibly passionately religious country. The Irish were known as the fortress of Europe for Catholicism, a Catholic stronghold that was as devout as like Italy was in Rome. And yet in the 30 years that I've lived in Ireland, Ireland has almost completely secularized in every way. It used to be you would be invited into somebody's home and they would have a minimum of 4 or 5 crucifixes in their house. 1 crucifix for every wall, and there would be a picture of the Sacred Heart and all this kind of thing. That never happens now. The only people that have crucifixes or any overtly religious sentiments are in their 60s or 70s or are even older. And the Irish did not need A lot of people say, oh, it's external forces that are causing this cultural subversion. It's the foreigners that are moving in and taking over our culture. Whereas Ireland stands as a very stark contrast to all of that. Because Ireland, until fairly recently, was a very homogenous culture. And it was such a homogenous culture that black people were something like 0.1% of the population. It was to such a degree that my brother has a Jamaican wife, and briefly he considered moving to Ireland, and his Jamaican wife actually went over to Ireland in, I think, the very early 2000s to see what the place was like. And she said that there was no prospect of getting a job anywhere in Ireland because the idea of hiring a black woman for any job in Ireland in the early 2000s was impossible. People just didn't do it. And it was very blatant. And it wasn't hateful. It wasn't hateful. They wouldn't say, oh, this is, you're a black person. We despise black people. We hate black people. You're never getting a job here. Their attitude was very simple. You're different from us. You're not from our country. We give jobs to Irish people. We're not giving you a job. Sorry. And so it was racism, but it wasn't hateful racism. It was provincialism, basically. And so obviously they didn't end up moving to Ireland because her attitude was, why on earth would I move to a country where I have literally no job prospects whatsoever? But during the early 2000s, while Ireland was still extremely homogenous, Catholicism collapsed utterly and completely. Church attendance went from something like 95% down to less than half, and it has continued to plummet ever since. And Ireland secularized incredibly hard. And it was because Catholicism lost its grip on the population. Mostly because of scandals. For example, there was, I believe, the Magdalene Laundry scandal happened, and there was also many other scandals related to Catholicism. Basically, the old Catholic, the local vicar has a thing for little boys. That kind of thing came out of in Ireland, and because the government decriminalized criticizing Catholicism and so on, people actually were able to speak out about the abuses the Catholic Church conducted in Ireland in various ways. And without any real foreign intervention, without any cultural subversion or anything like that, the core of Irish moral values vanished overnight. And people utterly rejected their past. Utterly and completely rejected their past, which was because they saw all of Irish culture up to that point to have been intrinsically linked with Catholicism. And when Catholicism's name became blackened, the Irish younger generation totally rejected them, spontaneously and vehemently. The question people should ask themselves is, which of these two sets of values speak stronger to you, because it's not pick and mix, not coexistence, just tolerance. Christianity has cut off the branch it was sitting on. Again, read Nietzsche's, or is it Nietzsche or Nietzsche's? Again, I am a colonialist. I don't pronounce other people's names well at all. Ambiguous, and it's only because the dominating power has tolerance as its set of values that it even exists to begin with. And yet the child abuse among teachers gets swept under the rug. It's almost like the church was targeted. I mean, I can safely say that there was no targeting of the church in Ireland. There very definitely and concretely were. You go to any small village in Ireland and you talk to the old people, and they will tell you exactly what it was like. And they will point to the children in that village, or more likely in America by now, because most of them moved away. They will say, yep, that was the local priest's favorite altar boy. Nietzsche, thank you. And I completely believe most of those stories. I mean, of course, there's always going to be liars, there's always going to be exaggerations, but the practical result of it was this total collapse of Irish traditional culture. And it was only after that collapse happened that multiculturalism began to set in. And Irish people tend to be incredibly accepting of multiculturalism because they are a rootless people now. They do not have a strong core set of values to stand up and fight back against the tide. I'm not saying that isn't happening. I'm saying that worse groups are protected. I do understand what you mean, Ark. Like, I'm not trying to downplay what you're saying. I really am not. I do agree with you. There is a double standard, no doubt about it. And my understanding of what happened in Ireland is why I say it is a bad idea to say it's those damn foreigners corrupting our traditional values, or it's the World Economic Forum destroying our culture. Because on the one hand, you can have a point, but on the other, a lot of times the culture was rotten to begin with. It was built on rotten foundations, and it doesn't take strong opposition to tear down those rotten foundations. It's up to each individual person to be an exemplar of the values and the traditions that they want to see passed down to their children. You can't take the cop-out and go, oh, well, it was those people over there that destroyed my culture, therefore I hate them, and as soon as they're gone, everything will be better. Because that's the coward's way out. Because it doesn't accept that the responsibility for the perpetuation of culture lies first and foremost with the individual and the family structure. If you are not part of the change you want to see, you can say whatever you like and the world will just step on you and ignore you. The laity should have fought to overtake and replace the clergy. Maybe Catholicism works differently than Orthodoxy, though, so that wouldn't be able to happen. Couldn't pick between Axis and Allies. Couldn't pick between Inshallah or Amen. But my perspective in it all is that it's why I consider myself a very dedicated person in the particular brand of Christianity that I follow. And it's why I have so much faith and trust in my local community, because I see all around me people who do still have morals, who were taught by intelligent preachers to exemplify the ideals that they were being taught. That they didn't have that issue where do as I say, not as I do. They were taught from the ground up, do as I do, not as I say. The saying comes after the deed. As somebody said earlier in chat, like, faith without works is dead. And that's very much what my church group believed in, and still does. Faith without works is dead. And it's not. I mean, I would say that the only. I'll be blunt. I think the only way to get that kind of community is to have religion be a part of it. But I mean, you can feel free to disagree with me on that specific thing. But the one thing I will not budge on in the slightest is that for a community to resist infiltration, it must have a higher purpose. It must have a higher purpose, no matter what. Kenneth Patterson, the church must be forever building, for it is forever decrying within and attract from without. For this is the law of life, that you must remember that while there is time of prosperity, the people will neglect the temple, and in a time of adversity they will decry it. The church has lost its way, the word is not up to interpretation. Yeah, I'd agree with you as well, Arclight. Everything I want to say on the topic comes back to Nietzsche. I swear he saw all of this coming. I haven't read too much of Nietzsche's work, but I think I might after this, honestly. I wish Protestants felt the same way about faith and work. You are also one of the most heavily Christian nations of the world, and the left learn how to weaponize your morals and your teachings against you. You equals Ireland in this case. I agree with you, but that definitely came later. It definitely came later. It came later after the structure had already been destroyed from within. Go full trad and embrace Confucianism. I have no idea why Confucianism has anything to do with trad. I thought trad was like trad cath and stuff. I didn't realize it also included Confucianism. Ugh. I am being peebly beeped. Oh, yes. I think there is one or two other things that I intended to look at on... Oh, yeah, this was an interesting thing. Switching back topics in just a second to Warhammer for a moment. I forgot that I had this tab open. I apologize. Nietzsche was a great diagnostician, but a terrible prescriber. I agree. and that's the thing. I think that what Kenneth Patterson has just said actually highlights and summarizes my entire issue with an awful lot of right-wing features and right-wing people. Or, you know what? I don't even like calling them right-wing. I would say more traditional kind of people. In fact, let me just, because my friend sent this recently. Oh, pardon me. My friend sent this recently. And I will try and find it. Yeah, Robert Louis Dabney on conservatism. This is a spectacular thing that my friend Alex loves to bring up constantly, and I'm going to read it because it sums up everything in such a fantastic way. It sums up the problem with the right-wing establishment brilliantly. Robert Louis Dabney on conservatism. It may be inferred again that the present movement for women's rights will certainly prevail from the history of its only opponent, Northern conservatism. This is a party which never conserves anything. Its history has been that it demurs to each aggression of the Progressive Party and aims to save its credit by a respectable amount of growling, but always acquiesces at the last in innovation. What was the resisted novelty of yesterday is today one of the accepted principles of conservatism. It is now conservative only in affecting to resist the next innovation, which will tomorrow be forced upon its timidity and will be succeeded by some third revolution, to be denounced and then adopted in its turn. American conservatism is merely the shadow that follows radicalism as it moves forward towards perdition. It remains behind it, but never retreads it, and always advances near its leader. Its impotency is not hard indeed to explain. It is worthless, because it is the conservatism of expediency only, and not of sturdy principle. It intends to risk nothing serious for the sake of the truth, and has no idea of being guilty of the folly of martyrdom. It always, when about to enter a protest, very blandly informs the wild beast whose path it essays to stop that its bark is worse than its bite, and that it only means to save its manners by enacting its decent role of resistance. The only practical purpose which it now serves in American politics is to give enough excuse to radicalism to keep it in wind and to prevent its becoming pursy and lazy, from having nothing to whip. No doubt, after a few years, when woman's suffrage shall have become an accomplished fact, conservatism will tacitly admit it into its creed, and thenceforth plume upon itself its wise firmness in opposing with similar weapons the extreme of baby suffrage, and when that too shall have been won, it will be heard declaring that the integrity of the American Constitution requires at least the refusal of suffrage to asses. There it will assume, with great dignity, its final position. I really love that speech. I love that speech. It's such a... This is why I hate the way education has gone. This is why because I find this so much fun to read, because it's so beautiful. The prose is so beautiful. This is so well written, and it is so impactful, and it's such a joy to read aloud. It's such a joy. Confucianism isn't a great thing to build a society off of. South Korea went hard into Neo-Confucianism after World War II, and it's a big part of why they've turned into a cyberpunk dystopia. An article foreigner, neo-Leninists are the real transphobes. Leftism isn't advancing or moving forward ever, though. There was an old joke in the Soviet bloc. Yesterday, we were on the edge of a cliff. Today, we have taken a great leap forwards. I love Soviet-era jokes. They're just so amazing. But yeah, that is... I'll just put a link to this in chat, actually, because this is something... Robert Louis Dabney is a very interesting character. And I think studying Robert Louis Dabney and his work should be mandatory for anyone who thinks they are a conservative and that they have anything worth protecting. I'll just pin that to the chat. This reminds me of a man complaining about how the church is trying to be hip and modern and corrupting the tradition and dogma. This man was Augustine. Yeah. I mean, just read the book of John, the 3rd John, where he says that people in the church do not accept anything from me with respect, and he was less than 100 years after the death of Jesus Christ. More like Robert Louis Dab-on. Yeah, this is the thing, is that you can't really look at any kind of conservative media in the modern day without realizing that they are absolute shadows of their former selves. The most hardcore right-wing conservative today would be considered a flaming leftist radical 100 years ago. And it's so true what Robert Louis Dabney says. This man spat facts so hard. I really wish I could get more people who think that the right can hold its ground to read him, because he just counters everything with such stark logic and stark frankness. He was just off a little bit in his timeline about the suffrage of babies and asses. Now we are going on to... Yes, Laz. This was the thing I wanted to bring up about Warhammer before, is that Games Workshop Group PLC, for a while, I'm not sure if this is still the same, allow me to actually check this in real time. Games Workshop PLC stock price. So it is up now, but for a little while, Games Workshop, after it made its Custodes tweet, actually hid their stock price. So you can't actually tell what it is right now. Well, you can tell it right now. It says that it's unavailable, can confirm. So multiple people confirm this, that they stopped showing their trading volume because they were worried about this. You have to actually fight for an ideal. You can't just fight against something. You can have a right-wing movement, but conservatism is a fool's errand. I agree 100%, Gigadramon. I just want the 1950s without women's suffrage, but VTubers instead. Pelosi is pushing to let girls vote at age 16 now, so the babies thing is almost here. Yep. I mean, basically the only thing that Dabney didn't predict was the idea of abortion becoming, like, abortion is basically the only thing that stops the whole, like, suffrage of babies, because suffrage of babies, ironically, is now a right-wing concern. They could have manipulated it themselves by buying back shares like Niji did last year. That might be interesting to look into at some point, actually, the stock price of Games Workshop. But now I want to move on to something a bit more terrifying, because who here wants to talk about periods? Who here wants to talk about periods? Because this was one of the most bizarre. I actually found this Twitter thread through somebody followed me, and I like to look at the profiles of people who follow me. And so I clicked on this person's profile, and one of their main retweets was this thread from Celia. Many of you actually need to learn more about periods, so I'm going to talk about one of the most hated topics, stopping your period. Please tell me you mean the punctuation mark. Ladies, it's your time to shine. For the majority of people, if you don't want to have a period and you're not actively trying to get pregnant, there's no medical reason to have one, and we will get into why this is terrifying later. The easiest way to achieve this is through hormonal birth control. If you're already on one, speak to your doctor about taking it continuously, no placebo week. If you're not on it, speak to your doctor about if this is an option for you and which option is best. HBC is a great way to stop your period if you want to get pregnant someday because it's not permanent. In fact, for many people with issues like endometriosis, etc., it actually helps protect our fertility by lessening the numbers of periods we have, because periods exacerbate endometriosis. Endometriosis, for those who don't know, is a condition where basically the lining of the wall of the uterus and womb develops scabs or calluses or something else similar to that kind of slough off and come out when you have a period. It makes periods a hell of a lot more sensitive and painful for women. For some of us, HBC doesn't work at stopping our periods. There are chemical and surgical options. These options aren't often as available to us because they have more side effects and can be permanent. Chemical, drugs like Lupron and Myfembree. Surgical, ablation, hysterectomy. I know people who have had hysterectomies. A hysterectomy is one of the most aggressive surgeries you can possibly have. To have a hysterectomy, your body is basically cored out. It is incredibly aggressive, invasive surgery that is about the equivalent of cutting off an arm. And once you have a hysterectomy, your entire pelvic floor basically is gone. Guys, those core muscles you work when you lift something? Well, in a woman's body, all of those core muscles are part of the reproductive organs that a hysterectomy removes, or rather, the internal organs that a hysterectomy removes are the ones that form essential mass for a woman's pelvic muscles to press down on whenever they lift something. And so if you have a hysterectomy, you're left with a great big gap between your legs, basically, internally. So what happens when your pelvic muscles start to push down on something? You get a prolapse. If you lift anything heavy after having a hysterectomy, you get a prolapse. Everything that's inside very quickly comes out and says that it wants a holiday. I know people that suffer from this problem, and it is a disgusting and horrible problem. And there's nothing that can be done about it. It is a permanent, lifelong condition. If a woman gets hysterectomy, she has been maimed and mutilated. She has been mutilated far more than a man who gets, say, a penis inversion. Doesn't having a hysterectomy cause early menopause? Yes, it can as well, because obviously you're cutting out a great amount of hormone receptors and creators. Those were a lot of scary words you just said. Yes, I cannot emphasize enough. If you know a woman who is thinking of getting a hysterectomy for a non-essential reason, you should tell her to look into it in as much detail as possible, because she is basically saying, I think I would like to cut off both my arms, in terms of how dramatically that is going to affect her life. Anyway, let us continue with this thread. I also want to point out that because of the side effects and permanence of chemical and surgical options to completely stop periods, many doctors make us go through many steps before this is even an option. All of these options to stop periods impact our ability. What a massive surprise! For those of us who want to have kids but don't like our periods, this is something we have to be aware of, which is why HBC is a wonderful option. For those of us who don't want kids, we do have more options, but they're harder to get because we can never have kids. If you notice, I don't care if your periods are painful or you just think they're annoying. If you don't want your period, for the majority of us, there's no medical reason to have one. This is a lie right here. It's either a lie or just misinformation. We often don't talk about our periods because this way, because there's a stigma that it's just something you have to deal with as a woman, and I want you all to know that's bullshit. Periods are expensive, annoying, it can be painful, and downright debilitating. You can hate them. I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong here. To anyone telling me this is not accurate, my gynecologist told me this, and after she told me this, after I asked if it was okay, I did more research, and every reputable medical source said the same thing. That should be terrifying. The only thing this tweet is doing is encouraging people to talk to their doctor about any of these options who would... Sorry, she's going to mess it up. Good lord, reading comprehension is at an all-time low. Now they will call you the period hater. I can see it already. They have also a misogynist. And this person says something important. They need to have more options if you wouldn't want to stop your period, but also wouldn't want to get pregnant, and we all know that there could probably be several better alternatives than pills or IUD that cause horrible side effects / pain. And down here she admits, periods are caused by hormones. It's probably not going to happen that the treatments aren't hormonal. And this is a major issue. Your period cleans out your inner body, OMFG, her gyno is a tut. Thanks, Proctor. I want to throw up now, and I was already having headaches, and I'm at work. Thanks. I agree. Her gynecologist is completely retarded. In fact, let me just do a quick Google search. What's the exact abbreviation? HBC. HBC effects on the sexual preferences of women, because this is something that quite a few women have commented on. The pill and sexual orientation. This might be it. Sexual behavior in women with non-alcoholic. Why is that a thing? Why is it giving me a ton of responses? Or let me just try hormonal birth control, because I think that Google is getting mixed up with HBC and hepatitis, which is hormonal birth control effects on the sexual preferences of women. Ah, yes, here it is. In a study of 3,740 women, the authors observed that 43% of them had experienced a reduction in sexual desire attributed to the use of hormonal contraceptives, compared with 12% of women who used hormone-free contraceptives. And there was a very interesting study here. I think this has got a dark link, so... The pill and sex drive. Yes. Sorry, give me a moment before I put something on screen, because I'm just quickly looking about it. That's an interesting one. I've heard the opposite. That's fascinating. I'm doing live research. This is introduction results. This is seemingly a decent one. Why can't I scroll down here? Come on, let me scroll down. What? Is this page just not freaking loading? Why is this page broken? This page is broken. It's not actually letting me scroll down. Oh, you bloody thing. I can't believe that. Here's a decent one. Here is a decent one that I quite like. Let's have a look at this one. Let me just look back at chat for a second. Not having your period is one of the symptoms of external testosterone, which leads to vaginal atrophy. So yeah, not having that for extended periods of time is bad. My friend had a lot of hormone stuff to prevent periods so they can have a fun nightlife. They lost all their sex drive and had misc discharge instead of the usual. It was very empowering. And a small testing pool, yeah. It is fairly small, but there's a lot of like different little things about it as well. But I find this one very interesting. So I've been contacted by a handful of readers now who have told me that going on or off the pill seems to have impacted their sexual preferences, and it's not just in my pills seem to have impacted the qualities I desire in my male partners kind of way. It's in I identified as a lesbian for a decade while I was on the pill, but now that I am off it, I am no longer attracted to women, I am attracted to men. And I have also heard the opposite. In these cases, the emails read something along the lines of, I identified as a lesbian until I went on the pill, but after going on it, I developed an attraction to men. My mind is blown, yet it probably shouldn't be. I say that my mind shouldn't be blown because, well, it shouldn't be. Decades of research has found that women's sex hormones impact their attraction to specific members of one sex. Why shouldn't it also impact their attraction between the sexes? Which seems really wild, but maybe it isn't. Now, guys, I just want to stop for a second here. Before we go down here, I would like to make a poll. Can I do a poll from here? No, I can't, so I have to go to my stream thing. Give me 2 seconds. Live stream. Engage with your audience. Start a poll. orientations. If this was talking about, yeah. Sorry, the poll, yeah, that fits. Because I've noticed a distinct double standard about this. So I'm curious to explain a bit more about the poll. It seems to be when homosexuality is discussed in the context of men, the whole "they were born this way" is almost constantly a talking point that pro-homosexuality advocates will bring up. You can't, you can't discriminate against gay men because they're born this way. They can't do anything about their orientation. Stop it. And yet, right here, there is a woman talking in the opening paragraph saying, frankly, lesbians went straight and straight women went lesbian because of a pill. So she is literally right here saying your sexual preferences can be changed by exposure to chemicals. Now imagine saying that to the opposite gender. Imagine saying to a gay man, you are only gay because of something in your body, or something you're taking, etc. and so on. I was about to say the exact same thing, the great gaslight of the gays, you were born this way, no external factors ever were a part of it, you just don't understand. Yep, and it seems like people are overwhelmingly agreeing with me. But to be completely honest, it's a known man fact that all girls are bi. Girls don't comprehend this. I mean, my own opinion on it is simply that it's a power and control kind of thing. That women together are simply I think to a woman, the idea of sexual interactions with another woman is intrinsically less significant than the idea of sexual interactions between two men. Because unless you use a sex toy, two women are not going to be penetrating each other. They are not going to be... again, men don't like to talk about this, but the fact is that stuff like anal sex, etc., has a damn load of side effects. A lot of gay men get very serious issues with prolapse and also with STDs and infections from anal bacteria and so on. So, it's not a pleasant thing. It's a significant and major thing for a man to penetrate another man because, yeah, that could have consequences. Whereas two women together, yeah, they're probably not going to be doing that. And also, of course, there's the whole power thing. Like, a man that submits to another man is a submissive. Women together, I mean, that's different. Monkeypox, yeah, exactly, Grant. Monkeypox as well. I could talk about this a lot, and it's something that a lot of women have disagreed with me over, but to me, I really do think there is a difference between men submitting to the sexual actions of another man and a woman doing the same. It's just there is a biological difference between the two. And of course, that is a very controversial thing to say. Where was I? Yes, which seems really wild, but maybe isn't. If we are to take it seriously, the idea that gender isn't as binary as biological sex, it really isn't wild at all. It just goes to demonstrate that sex hormones are intimately involved in attraction, and for some women, the hormonal changes initiated by the birth control pill can nudge their preferences in ways that are more noticeable than they are for others. The other thing that this got me thinking about was the phenomenon of midlife sexual orientation changes. This is the thing where women who were previously only involved in relationships with men or women, once they are in their 40s or thereabouts, start getting involved in relationships with women or men. In other words, the gender of their preferred partners changes. I think that there is a tendency to assume that this sort of thing happens mostly in response to cultural pressures. I would generally assume that as well. For example, if we know a woman who was previously only involved with men who started dating women later in life, there is a tendency to assume that she was probably interested in dating women all along, but didn't feel safe coming out as a lesbian until she was older. I would disagree with that. I would actually say the reverse. I would say that a lot of straight women get disappointed with very bad male partners and decide to become lesbians simply because they feel that it's going to be better than a man, which I can understand considering how dreadful the male dating pool is. And there is a good reason to believe that for a lot of women this is exactly what goes on. People who fall outside the cisgendered heterosexual mold are still routinely discriminated against, and for many, coming out can be scary and even dangerous. But given that the hormonal changes initiated by the pill may have the ability to nudge some women's sexual preferences this way and that, it also seems possible that midlife changes in a woman's partner choices might also occur because of midlife changes in sexual preferences. That is, it seems pretty plausible that the midlife hormonal changes that women experience as fertility begins to decline could nudge a woman's partner preferences in ways that, for some women, produce changes in the sex of their preferred partners. All of this has utterly fascinated me. It raises so many interesting questions about women's sexual psychology, attraction, and even the notion of the self. A person's self, which is our perceptions about what we are, is believed to be relatively stable. But given that hormonal changes may change our self in important ways, this view of the self could actually be a totally gendered assumption that applies less to women than it does to men. That is, the idea that each of us is a relatively fixed person, and that to be otherwise is pathological or deviant in some way, may be an assumption that was created based only on the experiences of men, whose hormones change less across their lifespan. For women, it may be the norm to the self to constantly evolve. We may have many different selves instead of just one self. And overall, even though this is obviously a very, very leftist perspective, I do actually agree with her based on my own experiences with women. I think I'll end the poll now because it's pretty obvious what people think. Let me roll up again. Here we are. When can we get members for this channel? Probably never, because I sincerely doubt I would ever get monetized with the kind of content that I talk about. They're putting chemicals in the pill to turn the freaking femmes gay. Proctor OnlyFans soon. Never. Muffy Graves, my gynecologist was trying to get all my parts removed. Since I do have high testosterone in my lady time, if, well, just horrible, oddly enough, once I stopped taking the pill, they calmed down. Down to where I'm just down to 1 day and not for 8 or more, almost like my body knows what it's doing all on its own. Good grief, I am so sorry you used to experience 8-day periods. That sounds absolutely nightmarish. WTF are lesbians going on birth control? Probably to control periods, literally. To regulate them. I was about to say that exact same thing. The Great Gaslight... Oh, I already read that, sorry. Women's are emotional and don't know what they want. Maybe it's due to all the crap in our food, makeup, hair, crap, all that. Denna actually bi. General consensus is girl on girl is hot, guy on guy is not. I never really got the appeal of strictly lesbian porn myself. I need there to be a man involved I can relate to. That said, men's sexuality, even towards gay men, is seen as barbaric, so if that article is about men, it'd probably be celebrated because it would mean more gay men for the alphabet soup. TLDR, women are always experiencing it's not a phase, mom. Show your members. I don't have members. Are you talking about my penis? Because I'm not showing that on stream, sorry. I'd like to go back with the whole male-female sexuality difference thing. Again, men are just biologically inclined to the idea that they need to spread their genetics around. And a man that willingly takes him out of competition by being gay is an objective benefit to a man that's in competition. Whereas... I don't know. I don't even know how to put it, really. But yeah, I'm actually not going to talk about it too much because it's too complicated and there's too many ways to argue about it. And it always goes down this stupid rabbit hole and we're never going to agree on it, so I'm not going to go down that way. I believe we're nearly at the 3-hour mark, so I'm not going to carry on too much longer. There was 1 or 2 more things that I wanted to bring up. Yes. This was quite interesting. We're going back to the more political side of things for a little bit. You're already digging yourself 6 feet in the eyes of the progressive public. What's 7 more inches going to change? I mean, it's more that I just don't feel as if there is a way for me to concisely explain what my opinion is without going down like a really complicated rabbit hole of justifications and arguments. I know that my arguments are just totally and completely against every single thing the progressive crowd would ever believe in. Again, this entire stream has been talking about how to fight back against the progressive infiltration. I'm never going to appeal to that crowd ever. But I don't like to give my opinions if I feel as if the more I talk about it, the more my opinion actually changes. And that's really the reason why I'm not going to comment too much more on that. So this is going to be our last article for tonight, which I find quite interesting because I realized later on that the woman who wrote this article has a lot of connections with people that I used to follow as well. Here it is. Unfortunately, Archive lets me view it the full thing. Do you hate Britain? I asked my pupils. 30 raised their hands. I would be among those people who raised their hands. After Catherine Bribel Singh had her prayer ban upheld, the head accused schools of failing to back UK values. One teacher writing anonymously reveals the troubling views of the children as young as 11. The Taliban do let girls go to school, boasted the teenage boy, but they stop them when they turn 11, which is very fair. You know what? I'm immediately going to make another poll. Is this kid right? In an after-school detention, a handful of pupils were doing their best to convince me, their teacher, that Afghanistan was much nicer now the Taliban were in control. Nothing I said would convince them. That's because they're basically right. Have you seen what Afghanistan was like before the Taliban took control? I mean, I'm not saying that the Taliban are a wonderful, perfect people, but I've seen plenty of tourist videos going around Afghanistan now that the Taliban are in control and saying that a huge number of horrible things that the US forces blatantly allowed to happen are just not happening any longer. And the Taliban massively cracked down on a huge number of things. The US occupation and the pathetic government in Afghanistan they set up just completely allowed, without any shame whatsoever. It's the Middle East. It was never good. I want a spouse who is academically intelligent, just not a liberal. Right or wrong, this kid is hella based. My pupils are a lively bunch. The school where I teach humanities is a large academy in the south of England and caters to those from poor families. Most are Muslim and a few have lived in Islamic countries, including Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan. They burst with character and enthusiasm for improving their lives. I work hard to help them and have a genuine pride in them, in a way only fellow teachers will understand. But I also worry about them. I share some of the same concerns that Catherine Bribel Singh expressed after her legal victory last week, where she successfully defended a High Court challenge to her ban on prayer rituals. In the absence of a clear commitment to British values, she argued identity politics was filling the vacuum. There's nothing wrong there. The more I get to know my pupils, the more distressed I am by some of their views. Of course, teenagers have always aspired to radical chic in order to shock their elders. In my youth, we lounged around the school common repeating Frankie Boyle's most offensive jokes. But this generation is different. The other day, in response to a comment made by a pupil, I asked a class of 13-year-olds to raise their hands if they hated Britain. 30 hands shot up with immediate, absolute certainty. Every single one of those 30 hands is completely correct. I hate Britain too. I'm not sure how many of my pupils support the Taliban. It is probably a minority, but not a small one. Many of the boys I teach hold shocking views on women. One Year 8 pupil regularly interrupts lessons with diatribes about Western society is brainwashing young men into becoming more feminine. This is a very based pupil. I hope he has a good future in life. Most of the lads I teach think women should have fewer rights than men. Mate, I know a bunch of women who think that women should have fewer rights than men. They spend citizenship lessons arguing that wives should not work. They're correct. Such views come from a dangerous manipulation of their faith they find online. Their misogynist influencer Andrew Tate is their hero, particularly since his claimed confession is... In some ways, the fact that these children hate Britain and all its values is not entirely surprising. Many have relatives whose lives were ruined by the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. They fled to Britain for a better life, having fought against oppressive regimes. It is strange, then, that a Kurdish boy of Iraqi descent should tell me how he admires Saddam Hussein's. Iraq's just a bit rubbish now, he reasons, a blame he can easily place with Britain. I mean, again, he's not exactly wrong. My pupils' childhoods were spent watching parents processing trauma from these wars, while around them, British government policies seemed to focus on disparaging immigrants, the hostile environment Brexit, and now the Rwanda plan. A Muslim teacher tells me she has been called a terrorist in the street. The children, she says, will have faced similar harassment. And notice that none of these children have ever gone out and taken a machete to somebody who said that to them. I'd say they're surprisingly well integrated, honestly. Wives should not be working unless they're VTubers. Aki love. Lord Miles Taliban videos Akino. I agree 100%. Those are the kind of videos that I'm highlighting too. I also watched a documentary about Afghanistan before it was released before the Taliban took back over, and it highlighted exactly why the Taliban were effortlessly able to take over Afghanistan. Again, the Taliban are a perfect example of a force that was able to take over a country, not necessarily because they were powerful, but because the force occupying that country had absolutely and completely failed in every way to implement a cultural change that made them resistant to takeover. Big Wheel, the thing is, they're not raising their hands because of the pig-humping government. They probably just have vapid views, like the Natural History Museum is theft because TikTok said so. I do agree with you, tragically. It's kind of the right but for the wrong reasons aspect of things. But all too often, these sentiments spill into bigotry towards their own country and others who live there. Due to the Gaza war, no group is more despised than the Jews, with pupils regularly making comments of pure hatred. Teachers are asked, who do you support, Israel or Palestine? We are supposed to remain neutral, but some staff adorn their laptops with pro-Palestinian slogans. And this reflects a big part of the problem. My school and many others are rolling over and not even attempting to mount a defense for Western values. But you hate the Western values. My colleagues tend to believe that the solution to our pupils' dislike of Britain is to design a curriculum that is packed with hand-wringing about Western imperialism and institutional racism. If we teach them we did wrong, then they will know that we are sorry and move on, the argument goes. Yeah, you people don't know many teenagers, do you? This process of radical healing can be useful. It can help to have difficult conversations and entice pupils from different backgrounds into engaging critically with their work, but I also think it has gone too far. Again, this is a case of a woman who is... This is the kind of progressive person the previous turning of the revolutionary wheel put into power, and now she is upset the revolution continues to turn further left. It always goes back to that. The revolution must always turn further left. In some schools, the anti-Western narrative is woven through much of the curriculum. A friend of mine teaches history and in a single day says he could teach the Spanish colonization of the Americas, the Portuguese colonization of Africa, the British colonization of India, the decolonization of the British Empire, and the slave trade. This relentless focus on empire does not seem to have made our pupils any less angry. The problem is not limited to my pupils. I once taught at a middle school class with mostly white children. Here, the curriculum was similarly designed to open minds to the evils of Western civilization. The pupils were not susceptible to Islamism, but were still imbued with a sense that their country is particularly bad. Increasingly, schools are not dissuading children of these prejudices, but confirming them. I have not seen... I'll just finish that in case I'm wrong. I'm not going to comment on it until we reach the end. My school is only part of the problem. The history curriculum at many schools may now feature the diversity of troops in the First World War, or the 1980s as a period of queer exploration. These are worthwhile subjects for an undergraduate essay, but not substitutes for the basic building blocks of historical knowledge. I once observed a Year 8 lesson on the Black Tudors. One pupil raised his hand to ask, who were the Tudors? They hadn't thought to teach the Reformation before the racism. Similarly, when teaching the Norman conquest, it is becoming unfashionable to teach the pivotal Battle of Hastings. Instead, some schools focus on studying Empress Matilda, who ruled Britain. Again, a worthy subject at some point, but an odd one to teach Year 7s instead of the fact Harold Godwinson was probably shot in the eye with an arrow. I worry the effect of this pedagogical radicalism is not to calm tensions but to exacerbate them. Yes! A teacher friend visited a school recently and heard its head of history describe the aim of their curriculum as the creation of scholar activists. They said they wanted to turn pupils into radical agents of protest against a state they say is institutionally racist. Some of this chaos is down to the growth of academy schools that began under Michael Gove when he was Education Secretary. Gove attempted to introduce a conservative version of the national curriculum, but now academies and free schools, which compose 80% of secondary schools, have greater freedoms to dictate their curriculums. The result for some schools has been much less 1066 and much more all that. Solving this problem is tricky. It is sad there seems to be little desire to measure and discuss the scale of disaffection I see from my pupils. Curriculums, to the extent pupils pay attention to them, can be a powerful tool to mold society. Yes, you are part of the problem, girl. Yet hardly anyone is arguing for a balanced, liberal curriculum that would focus on traditional subjects while incorporating critical and decolonized narratives. From what I have seen, the alternative to this produces some pretty troubling results. Yes, because, again, this person is the previous wheel turn of the revolution. And the thing that I was going to comment on earlier is the fact that she comments on Western values, but she never actually says what those values are. Her entire commentary on Western culture is the negatives of it, where she talks about how, she says empires are evil and all this kind of stuff. And you know what? Yeah, I think empires are pretty damn evil too. But you can teach the facts and leave people to make up their own minds. You don't need... It's like she said, a useful idiot waking up. Exactly, Luminous. This is the definition of a useful idiot. The moment she says that curriculums can be a powerful tool to mold society, this is a useful idiot, because she doesn't understand that education is about teaching people to give people the facts with which to operate their lives and think for themselves. She thinks that education is a tool to mold society. Also, funny story about Afghanistan. Before the president fled the country, he wrote the book Fixing Failed States. I might actually look that book up. I have not read that book. So, as kind of a summary to everything that I've talked about, this was an unusually political stream, actually. I'm surprised how political we got. To reiterate a bit, because I'm going to end stream soon. In fact, I think we're nearly at the 3-hour mark. Are we exactly at the 3-hour mark just now? Yeah, we are. Just another 3 minutes. To summarize this stream, it is completely essential that in every part of your life, you ensure or take at least some effort to surround yourself with people who share a moral character with you. And when I say moral character, I do not mean they think the same things that you do. I'm saying that they understand that there are ideals and principles, no matter what they may be, which transcend personal desire and fulfillment. You need to have association with people who are awake to the fact that society is based on principles that transcend the individual. The moment you allow things to turn into, this is good because it makes me feel good, and this is bad because it makes me feel bad, you are dealing with a class of people who you cannot reason with and you will never find common ground with. And I see this happen over and over. I have personally had friendships which have been torn apart because after years of enjoying things together, years of gaming together, years of role-playing together, years of doing all these kinds of things together, there has been one small thing that we have disagreed on, and the other person has said, I can no longer view you as a friend, and I hate and regret all the fun we had together, because I now think you are an evil person because you don't think that this thing is correct. Because this thing I find painful and miserable, and you don't take it as seriously as I do. What values bind the West is Indo-European languages and Christianity and European philosophy. I would more or less agree with you there. She's only upset her propaganda failed against a strong cultural root. Exactly. Exactly. And this is why we're seeing a resurgence of Islam, because Islam, for all of its faults, at least understands how to motivate people to engage with a cause that is higher than their immediate needs and desires. And what I constantly find very annoying is that people will go, oh, this thing over here is bad because it does things that are in opposition to me. Okay, it can be bad. That's fine. But if you don't possess the ability to look at a cause which is gaining ground against yours and reverse engineer the reasons why it is gaining ground against your cause, you are always going to lose. I mean, let's put it in a different perspective. Imagine that, firearms were invented by one country in Europe, who then started to slaughter knights and other medieval foot soldiers with them. But instead of adapting the firearms for their own armies, all the other nations of Europe went, this is bad. Firearms are inherently evil. Gunpowder comes from Satan. We can never touch firearms under any circumstances because then we will be tainted. Also, talking about Tate is a misdirection. Exactly. The idea that Andrew Tate appeals to Muslims is just... yeah, no. You have to develop a mindset where you are able to analyze the reasons why people are winning against you, because otherwise you'll just be defeated. And that's really what I encourage people to do, whether it's in wargaming, politics, personal philosophy, or anything, is to simply have a creative mind that is able to look at different ideas that they may not even like and understand the fundamental things that draw people to them. Because it's only when you understand that will you be able to mount an effective defense. And I hope that in some way that has informed people or helped people, or hell, just been entertaining for people to listen to, because I enjoy talking about this kind of stuff, and I'm very grateful that there seems to be at least a reasonable audience of people that will do that as well with me. And for Wednesday, let me just check my calendar as well. So Wednesday, I will be streaming on Wednesday as well as on Friday, because on Friday, the Mana Lords releases, and I am going to do a day one stream on Mana Lords when it releases. Mana Lords, I will just put a link in this, Steam Mana Lords. I'll just put a link in chat to that as well, because Mana Lords is a fascinating game that is just about to release. A lot of people are saying that it's going to replace Total War as the medieval battle simulator of choice, but it also seems to be a very advanced and interesting city building game, as well as a military style campaign. That's why I follow people I don't agree with. How can I argue against something when I don't have the facts? You a decent background noise. Thank you very much, Takadachi. I appreciate that. I've completely lost where my stream chat is. This is what happens when you have too many tabs open. Yeah, Steam powered Mana Lords. I'm going to be doing a day one stream on Mana Lords, and I think that it's going to be quite fun. I think I will enjoy Mana Lords an awful lot. Hopefully I'll have a 2 or 3 hour stream of that. Going to be a bit different from my regular streams, I know, because I've decided that I don't really like doing gaming streams overall. I feel not only do they do less numbers-wise, but they also are just not natural ways that I play games. Whereas I'm always ready. I'm always ready, and I'm always enthusiastic to talk about random news articles and stuff like that. And on Wednesday, I'm probably going to be covering something. I will be doing a bit of more of a retrospective on the Kenji situation and everything, because I think that by Wednesday, things will have settled down enough that I can do a proper decent retrospective, and there's a couple more things that I can talk about regarding that. And then after that stream material, I'll probably be talking about online privacy and ways that you can deal with it, because yeah, online privacy is a little bit of an issue nowadays. The period talk was wonderful while I was fighting Sister Friday in DS3. I'm glad you enjoyed that, Just a Canon. So for now, since it's just turned 3 hours, I'm going to end the stream here. Let me just see if there's anybody else. I can't raid because I still do not have enough, I still don't have enough subs. Is there anyone here else who is streaming right now? This is Dizzy. People can go and have a look at Dizzy, because Dizzy is always fun. Good night, Prostate. Good stream. Thank you very much. Allow me to just put it in here. The fastest retrospective is that everyone involved in the Kenji situation has saw the reminder of why we flock to behaving companies. Yeah, everybody go give Dizzy some love, because God knows that woman needs it. Her life is an absolute train wreck. So I'll see you all on Wednesday. Thank you very much for coming, and I will see you later. New prostate clip is out. Can somebody link that to me? Because I'm just going to head off, and I'm going to have a drink and also go to the bathroom. So Azahara, if you could send that in my Discord, I'd appreciate it. Farewell, goodbye, good night. Thank you all for coming.